There is something that happens in the dark, not in sleep, before it. In that hour when the world has finally gone quiet, when the screens are dark and the conversations are done, when there is nothing left to do and nowhere left to go, the mind turns inward, and it finds something there. Not chaos exactly, not peace. Something older than both. Tonight you are lying here, the weight of your body pressing gently into what is beneath you. The room is dim or dark. The sounds outside have settled into a low, familiar hum, and somewhere in the space between waking and sleep, a question forms, not a question you chose. One that simply arrives. You have felt it before, this sense that the ordinary world, the one you navigate with your schedule and your duties and your plans, is somehow resting on something deeper, something older, something that does not have a name you were taught in school. The ancient world had a name for it. And tonight we are going to sit with that name and everything it holds. This is not a lecture. It is not a test. You do not need to remember any of it. Just let it move through you, the way stars move through a dark sky, slowly, without urgency, without needing to arrive anywhere. There is something the Hermetic tradition understood about this very moment. You lying here, mind beginning to soften, the day releasing its grip, and it is not what you might expect. We will come to it. But first, let us begin with a question. Not the loudest question your mind carries. Not the one about tomorrow, or the thing you should have said, or the task that still waits. A quieter question. One that a seeker asked in an ancient text more than 1700 years ago. He said, "What do I most wish to learn?" And what came back to him was not information, not facts, not a lesson. What came back was light. Let that settle for a moment. The body is heavy. The breath is easy. There are two kinds of knowing, the Hermetic tradition says. The kind you gather from the world, from books and teachers and experience, and another kind, the kind that rises when the gathering stops. Tonight, we are moving slowly toward the second kind. There is no rush. The night is long. The ancient wisdom we are about to move through was written for exactly this kind of stillness. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands open. Something has always been here, beneath the noise of your days, beneath the doing and the deciding and the managing. The Hermetic tradition called it the divine mind, and they believed with complete seriousness across many centuries, across Egypt and Greece and the Renaissance courts of Florence, that this mind is not separate from you. It is what you are made of. We will come back to this. But first, let us travel back to the beginning of a very old story. A story about a teacher who may have lived or may never have lived at all, and who taught the deepest wisdom either way. The teacher's name, translated from Greek, means the thrice greatest. And what he taught, or what was taught in his name, has quietly shaped the way the Western world thinks about mind, matter, meaning, and mystery. For more than 2,000 years, you may not have heard his name before, or you may have heard it whispered at the edges of things you have already read. Either way, you are ready for it now, because you are here, and the night is here. And something in you already knows what we are about to remember together. Let the next breath come slowly, and let us begin. Chapter 2, The Thrice-Great Teacher. Somewhere in the ancient world, no one is entirely sure where a figure was imagined into being. Not a god, exactly, not a human either, something in between. The Greeks called him Hermes. The Egyptians called him Thoth. And somewhere in the first few centuries of the Common Era, in the rich and restless cultural mixing bowl of Alexandria, Egypt, these two figures merged. What emerged was Hermes Trismegistus. Trismegistus, 3 times great, great as a philosopher, great as a priest, great as a king. This was how the ancient world imagined him, not as a single individual, but as a kind of crystallized wisdom, an intelligence so complete that it had to be called great 3 times just to begin to approach it. Picture a man, or the idea of a man, sitting in a library that does not exist anymore. The light comes through high windows. The scrolls are stacked in rows. He is not reading. He is listening. To what? To the silence behind the words. That is the first thing to understand about the Hermetic tradition. It is not primarily a tradition of accumulating knowledge. It is a tradition of learning how to listen to what the knowledge is pointing toward. Hermes Trismegistus, whoever he was, knew this. And here is something worth holding gently. The fact that we cannot confirm he existed as a historical person does not make his teachings less true. Some of the most transformative wisdom in human history has arrived without a verified biography. The teachings written in his name, the Corpus Hermeticum, as scholars now call it, were composed over several centuries. Most of them were written in Greek, probably between the 2nd and 4th centuries of the Common Era. They were written in Alexandria, where Egyptian religion, Greek philosophy, Jewish mysticism, and early Christianity were all in daily conversation. The Hermetic texts are the result of that conversation. They are philosophical dialogues, a teacher and a student. Sometimes Hermes and his son Tat, sometimes Hermes and his student Asclepius, sometimes Hermes himself receiving instruction from a vast cosmic intelligence he calls Poimandres, the shepherd of men. Each dialogue begins with a question, and each answer opens into a larger mystery. Let your shoulders drop for a moment. Breathe where you are. This is worth noticing. Even the structure of the Hermetic teaching is designed to deepen, not to resolve. Every answer opens a door. Behind the door is another door, and behind that one, light. A scholar in 15th century Florence named Marsilio Ficino understood this. When the texts of Hermes Trismegistus arrived in his city, translated from Greek into Latin at the request of Cosimo de' Medici, Ficino set aside everything else he was working on. He had been translating Plato, the complete works of Plato. He set Plato aside. He turned first to Hermes. Why? Because he believed, and many serious minds agreed with him, that these texts carried something close to original wisdom. A first teaching offered before the world had covered it over with noise. He was wrong about the age of the texts. The scholars have since established they are not as ancient as Ficino believed. But he was not wrong about what he felt when he read them. There is something in the Hermetic writings that strikes a reader with a sense of recognition, not novelty, not surprise, recognition, the feeling that you have remembered something you already knew. And that feeling, the Hermeticists would say, is not a trick of the mind. It is the mind beginning to remember what it is. That is the question beneath the question we began with. Not who was Hermes Trismegistus, but what happens in a person when they encounter these teachings and feel inexplicably at home. That answer takes the rest of tonight to unfold, and the night is long enough. Chapter 3, Egypt, Greece, and Revelation. Let us take a moment to understand the world that produced these teachings. Ideas do not arrive from nowhere. They arrive from a particular sky, a particular street, a particular century's way of being afraid. Alexandria, Egypt, the 1st through 4th centuries of the Common Era. Imagine a city built at the edge of the Mediterranean. The great library is there, or what remains of it. Ships arrive daily from every corner of the known world. Merchants, philosophers, priests, mystics, refugees. Every major religion and intellectual tradition of the ancient world is within walking distance of every other one. In Alexandria, a Jewish scholar might study Plato before morning prayers. An Egyptian priest might debate the nature of the soul with a Greek philosopher. A Roman citizen might find himself moved to tears in a Christian assembly he wandered into by accident. The city was a pressure cooker of worldviews, and out of that pressure came something extraordinary, a kind of wisdom that belonged to none of the traditions and drew from all of them, that saw no contradiction between Egyptian myth, Greek philosophy, and the language of divine revelation. That said, the cosmos is one, truth is one, and the mind that reaches for it will find it, regardless of which tradition opened the door. This was the Hermetic impulse, not a religion exactly, not a philosophy school either, something wilder and more personal than both, a path of inner knowing. The Greek word for this kind of knowing is gnosis, and it did not mean accumulating information. It meant direct experience, a knowing that comes through contact, not through study. Here is the difference that matters. You can learn everything there is to know about swimming, the physics of water, the technique of each stroke, the physiology of how the body floats, and still not know what it feels like to be carried by the sea. Gnosis is what it feels like to be carried by the sea. The Hermetic tradition was designed to produce that experience. And it understood, crucially, that the experience could not be forced, could not be manufactured, could only be prepared for. Let your breath slow for a moment. Let the weight of your body settle. The ancient world was not so different from this one in the ways that count. People lay awake. They wondered what their lives meant. They felt the strange loneliness of consciousness, of being aware, inside a world that mostly does not seem to notice them. And they turned to wisdom traditions for the same reason you are lying here now. Not to be fixed, not to be improved, to be understood. The Hermetic texts understood the experience of having a mind, of being a creature who thinks and feels and reaches in the dark for something larger than the reaching. One of the early Hermetic dialogues begins with a seeker who is exhausted. He has tried, through ordinary thought and effort, to understand the nature of the world. He has studied, he has debated, he has reasoned his way down every corridor he could find, and he arrives, finally, at a wall, not despair. Something more interesting than despair, a kind of receptive emptiness. And in that emptiness, a vision, a light. And in the light, a voice that does not speak in words, but in something deeper than words. This vision, the opening of the first Hermetic dialogue, is the template for what the entire tradition is pointing toward. Not argument, not proof, not doctrine. An encounter between the thinking human mind and something it cannot quite think its way to. Something it can only receive. The night you are in right now is not so different from that moment. The mind has quieted from its most urgent tasks. The body is still, and there is a kind of listening available to you now that is simply not accessible in the middle of a busy day. That is not a coincidence. The ancient world knew this about night, and so did Hermes. Chapter 4. The Books of Hermes. Let us be honest about something. The texts that carry the name of Hermes Trismegistus are not easy. They are written in a language of symbol and paradox. They layer meaning the way an old building layers centuries of renovation. You look at one surface, and beneath it is another, and beneath that another. This is deliberate. The Hermetic tradition believed that wisdom should not be given all at once, that the mind needs to be opened slowly, the way a hand opens from a fist, gradually, gently, with patience. Think of it this way. If someone handed you a map to a country you had never visited, you would look at it with interest. You might trace the roads with your finger, you might find the capital and the coast, but you would not yet know what the air smells like there in the morning. Or what the locals talk about at night. The Hermetic books are like that map, and the territory they point to is not a place on earth, it is the interior of a human life, the deep country of the mind. The most important of the texts is called the Poimandres. It is the first dialogue in the Corpus Hermeticum, a collection of 17 treatises, written in Greek, preserved in Byzantine manuscripts, and nearly forgotten until the 15th century. Nearly. Because the ideas were never fully lost. They moved, they migrated into Neoplatonist philosophy, into Sufi mysticism, into medieval alchemy, into the Renaissance arts, into the margins of early modern science. Isaac Newton, whose mathematical genius reshaped the modern world, spent as much time studying alchemical and hermetic texts as he spent on physics. His private papers, when finally examined by historians, showed a man who believed that the visible world and the invisible world were part of the same system. That was a very hermetic way to see things. The scholar Frances Yates, in her landmark work on the Hermetic tradition, showed how deeply these ideas shaped the intellectual life of Europe from the 15th through the 17th centuries. Artists, scientists, philosophers, mystics, all drawing from the same ancient well. Let your breathing settle. Notice where your body feels warmest. What is remarkable about the Hermetic tradition is not its age, it is its resilience. These texts were nearly lost. They were hidden during persecutions. They were mistranslated, misunderstood, and misappropriated. And still, they kept returning. Why? Because they address something permanent in the human condition. The longing to understand what the mind is, where it came from, where it goes, and what it might become if properly attended to. The Corpus Hermeticum opens with a seeker in a state we would recognize immediately. He is tired of ordinary knowing. He is lying, the text says, in a bodily sleep. But his mind is awake. And in the space between the body's rest and the mind's wakefulness, something arrives. Not a dream, exactly. Something more precise. A presence. And the presence asks him, what do you wish to hear and see and to learn and come to know by thought? The seeker says, I want to learn of all things. And the teaching begins. Tonight, something similar is available to you. Not a vision, not a supernatural event, but a kind of opening, a willingness to learn not just with the thinking part of the mind, but with whatever lies beneath the thinking. That willingness is all that is asked of you right now. The weight of your body is safe. The breath is moving on its own. And the teaching, 2,000 years old, is just beginning. Chapter 5. The Divine Mind. At the center of Hermetic philosophy is a single, staggering idea. The source of all things is mind, not physical matter, not blind force, not accident, Mind. The Greeks called it nous, pronounced nous. The word is old. It appears in Plato, in Aristotle, in the pre-Socratic philosophers who were trying, before Socrates, to understand what lies beneath the visible world. But in the Hermetic tradition, nous becomes something more than a philosophical concept. It becomes a living presence. The first dialogue of the Corpus Hermeticum describes it this way. The seeker receives a vision of a boundless light, calm, joyful, containing everything, and within the light, a darkness, not threatening, but deep, a coiling, serpentine depth. Then the light speaks, or rather, the light sends forth something, a divine word, a logos, that moves upon the darkness and begins to separate it, to order it, to call the world into being. This is not so different from other creation stories you may have encountered, but the Hermetic version has a specific emphasis that changes everything. The cosmos is not a machine built by a distant, indifferent force. The cosmos is an expression of mind, and because it is an expression of mind, it is alive in every part, every star, every stone, every cell of the body you are resting in right now. The cosmos, in Hermetic thought, is not a container you live inside. It is a thought you are part of. Let that land for a moment. You are not a small, separate creature in an empty universe. You are a concentrated point of awareness within a universe that is itself aware. The Hermeticists call this the living all, and they drew from it a conclusion that the psychologist Carl Jung, working 19 centuries later, would arrive at through a completely different method. The mind is not locked inside the skull. It participates in something larger. Jung spent decades studying Hermetic and alchemical texts. He believed, not as mysticism, but as a psychological observation, that the human psyche is connected to a layer of reality that exceeds the individual. He called it the collective unconscious. The Hermeticists would have recognized that phrase immediately. They had a simpler name for what it pointed toward. They called it the all. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands uncurl. Here is what this means for the mind that will not rest at night. If the source of all things is mind, if you are not an accident in an empty universe, but a concentrated expression of cosmic intelligence, then the restlessness you feel is not a malfunction. It is the larger mind moving through you. It is the cosmos thinking itself through a particular point of awareness that happens to be you. That does not make the restlessness comfortable, but it changes what the restlessness means. It means something in you is awake to something real. And that something has always been awake. Long before you developed a schedule, a name, a list of worries, the Hermetic texts say that the true self, the part of you that is genuinely nous, genuinely divine mind cannot be harmed, cannot be lost, and cannot be confused for very long. It can be forgotten, but forgotten is not the same as gone, and tonight the process of remembering has already begun. Chapter 6: Why the Cosmos Lives. Take a moment to imagine something. You are standing on a hillside at night, clear sky, no city lights. The stars are visible from horizon to horizon, not as points of light, but as a depth, a field that goes on and on in every direction. Now, imagine that what you are seeing is not dead matter scattered through empty space. Imagine that every point of light is, in some sense, awake, that the patterns connecting them are not random, that the distances between them are not empty, that the cosmos, from edge to edge, is one breathing, thinking, pulsing system. This is what the Hermetic philosophers believed, and they were not alone. This vision of a living cosmos, what scholars call the anima mundi, the soul of the world, runs through Neoplatonism, through Stoic philosophy, through certain strands of Islamic mysticism, and through the natural philosophy of the Renaissance. It is the view that the universe is not a machine. It is an organism, and like all organisms, it has an interior life. Now, this is not a claim about physics. Modern science has its own methods, and they are valuable. This is a claim about how the human mind relates to the universe it finds itself inside. If the cosmos is a machine, then you are a part inside a machine. Your consciousness is an accident. Your longing for meaning is a neurological quirk. Your sense that something deeper is available is a comfortable illusion. But if the cosmos is alive, if it thinks in some sense the way you think, then your consciousness is not an accident. It is the cosmos becoming aware of itself through you. That is a very different place to stand. The Renaissance philosopher Pico della Mirandola, deeply influenced by Hermetic thought, wrote one of the most extraordinary passages in European intellectual history. He imagined God addressing the newly created human being, and in Pico's telling, God says that the human is the only creature with no fixed nature. Every other being has a predetermined role, but the human can choose, can rise or fall, can become, through choice and attention, almost anything. This was Hermetic thinking, dressed in the language of Renaissance Christianity. The human as microcosm, the small world that contains, in miniature, the structure of the large one. Every pattern in the cosmos has a corresponding pattern in the human being. The movements of the stars, the elements, the hierarchies of being, all of it echoed in some form in the structure of a single human life. Let your body settle for a moment. Feel the breath moving without effort. The reason these ideas have persisted across 2,000 years is not that people found them beautiful, it is that people found them useful. Not useful the way a hammer is, useful. Useful the way a mirror is useful. A mirror shows you what is there, and what the Hermetic cosmos mirror showed was this: your inner life is not random. Your moods, your fears, your longings, your restlessness, your rare moments of clarity, they are not noise. They are patterned, and the patterns have names. The tradition spent centuries giving those names. But here is the thread to hold now. The cosmos is alive. You are a part of it, not separate from it. And the order that runs through the stars also runs through you, which means that even in your most scattered moments, even tonight, with the mind running in its familiar circles, there is an order underneath, waiting, patient, breathing. Chapter 7, As Above. So below, there is a document so old that no one knows exactly when it was written, so short that it can be read in under 3 minutes, and so influential that its central phrase has been quoted by alchemists, mystics, philosophers, and scientists across 15 centuries. The document is called the Emerald Tablet, and its central phrase is this: as above, so below. As below, so above. We will return to the Emerald Tablet in full later tonight. But this phrase, this one principle, is worth sitting with now. As above, so below. At its simplest, it means that the patterns of the large world and the patterns of the small world mirror each other. That what happens in the cosmos is reflected in the human body. That what happens in the human psyche is a version of what happens between the planets. The medieval world took this very literally. Astrology, as practiced by serious thinkers in the ancient and medieval periods, was not about personality tests. It was a system for understanding how cosmic rhythms express themselves in individual lives. The physician Paracelsus, who lived in the 16th century and drew heavily on Hermetic ideas, believed that understanding the body required understanding the cosmos. He saw the human being as a compressed universe, every organ corresponding to a celestial force. This is the medical application of as above, so below. But there is a psychological application that is more directly useful tonight. What happens in the outer world mirrors what happens in the inner world, and what happens in the inner world, the quality of your attention, the tone of your thoughts, the way you relate to your own experience, mirrors outward. This is not mysticism. This is observation. You know from your own life that when you wake up with a quiet, settled quality inside, the day tends to unfold more smoothly. Not because external events changed, but because your perception is different. Your responses are different. The story you are telling yourself about what is happening is different. And you know the reverse. When the interior is churned, the exterior follows. Let your breath come slowly. Let your shoulders settle. As above, so below is not just a cosmic principle. It is an invitation to pay attention to the interior. Because if the interior and the exterior are in correspondence, then attending to one is attending to both. This is why the Hermetic tradition was never primarily about the stars. The stars were a language for speaking about the self. The planetary movements were a metaphor for the movements of the soul. When the ancient thinker described the sun as a principle of radiance and clarity, they were also describing something that can happen inside a person, a moment of pure seeing, unobstructed by habit or fear. When they described Saturn as a principle of contraction and weight, they were also describing that particular quality of mind that feels slow, dense, pulled toward the past. The cosmos, in Hermetic thinking, is a mirror, and when you look into it carefully enough, you stop seeing the stars. You start seeing yourself. There is one more piece to this, and it changes the direction of everything. If the above and the below mirror each other, then the movement can go in either direction. You can read the cosmos to understand the self, or you can attend to the self to understand the cosmos. The second direction, the inward one, is where the Hermetic tradition puts most of its energy. Because the Hermeticists believed something remarkable. They believed that the fully realized human being, the one who has done the inner work, who has understood the patterns, who has aligned the above and the below within themselves, does not merely mirror the cosmos. They become a point of clarity through which the cosmos knows itself. And that is the third greatness of the cosmos. Thrice great, not power over the world, but transparency to it. Think about what this means for a life lived with any serious attention to the interior. Every year you have spent trying to understand yourself, the patterns that repeat, the reactions that surprise you, the qualities you admire in others and suspect in yourself. This was not navel-gazing. In the Hermetic understanding, it was cosmology. To understand the self is to understand a pattern that runs through all of existence. To map the correspondences within your own experience, the way anger and fear live on the same spectrum, the way love and grief are never far apart, the way the tightness in your chest when you lie down mirrors something that has not yet been named. This is the sacred art the tradition was pointing toward. Not abstract, not mystical, lived, particular, yours. The Emerald Tablet does not say, "Look at the stars." It says, "As above, so below." The movement is always inward, and the further inward you move, honestly, patiently, without flinching, the more you find not a smaller world, but a larger one. The same patterns, the same principles, the same light, already present, already yours. Chapter 8. The Birth of the Inner World. Somewhere around the year 1460, a Greek manuscript arrived in Florence. It had been acquired from Macedonia, possibly from a monastery. Its journey from the ancient world to Renaissance Italy is not entirely clear. What is clear is what happened when Cosimo de' Medici, the aging patriarch of the most powerful family in Florence, encountered it. He told his scholar Marsilio Ficino to stop everything else he was doing. Ficino was in the middle of translating Plato, the complete works of Plato. Cosimo told him to set Plato aside and translate this manuscript first. The manuscript was the Corpus Hermeticum. Ficino worked quickly. He wanted Cosimo to be able to read the translation before the old man died. He finished in time. And according to the accounts that survive, something shifted in the Florentine intellectual world from that moment onward. Ideas that had been scattered through many traditions suddenly had a center, a name, a lineage. The ideas of Plato made more sense in light of them. The ideas of Plotinus and the Neoplatonists clicked into place, and Ficino himself was transformed. He became the founder of a philosophical community, the Platonic Academy of Florence, that was, in its deepest commitments, Hermetic in spirit. A community of thinkers, artists, and wealthy patrons who gathered not merely to debate ideas, but to practice them, to sing, to study the stars, to attend to the interior. Let your breath settle. Notice the weight of your body where it touches what is beneath you. What Ficino understood and what his community enacted was something the Hermetic tradition had always insisted on. Wisdom is not information, it is practice. The mind is transformed not by reading, but by attending, by noticing, by sitting with something long enough that it stops being an object of thought and becomes a quality of awareness. Ficino translated not just the words, but something of that spirit into the Renaissance, and through the Renaissance into the modern world. The philosophy of the individual interior life, the idea that what happens inside a person matters, that the quality of one's attention has real consequences, that the self is not fixed but can be shaped by attention and practice. This philosophy has Hermetic roots. When you sit tonight with a sense that your inner life is worth attending to, you are breathing in an inheritance that goes back to Alexandria, and through Alexandria to ancient Egypt and Greece, and through those to something even older that has no name. The tradition was always pointing toward this, not the accumulated learning of centuries, but the quiet act of turning inward and finding something there, something alive. And there is one more dimension of this that carries us into the heart of what the Hermetic teachers were saying about human experience. They said, "The inner world is not a reflection of the outer one. It is the other way around. The outer world is a reflection of the inner," which means that the most important thing a person can do in any century, under any circumstance, is cultivate the quality of what lives in them. That is the birth of the inner world. And that birth, the Hermetic tradition says, is not a metaphor. It is the most real thing that can happen to a human being. Chapter 9, Overthinking and the lower mind. Now let us talk about something you know very well. The kind of thinking that does not quiet down. The circular kind. The rehearsing kind. The kind that takes a single worry and turns it over and over, finding new angles to examine it from, inventing new scenarios to run through, reaching no conclusion but refusing to stop. You know this kind of thinking. The Hermetic tradition had a name for the part of the mind that generates it, not a polite name. They called it the lower mind. Not lower in value, they were not dismissing it. Lower in position, below the level of the nous, the divine mind. Connected to the body, to the senses, to the world of matter and time and change, the lower mind is enormously useful. It plans meals, it navigates traffic, it remembers appointments and manages relationships and tracks the 1,000 details of a life. But the lower mind has a problem. It does not know when to stop, because the lower mind is built for a world of constant change, a world where every situation requires attention, where danger can arrive from any direction. It tends to stay running, even when the situation has passed, even when the danger was never real, even in the dark, in a room where nothing is happening, with a body that is safe and a schedule that is, for the next several hours, empty. The lower mind keeps going, because that is what it was built to do. The Hermetic tradition did not see this as a character flaw. It saw it as a structural mismatch. The lower mind is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is built for the material world, the world of survival, of time, of causation. But you are not only a material being. You have, the Hermetic texts insist, a dimension that is not subject to the laws of material survival, that does not live in time the way the body does, that is not threatened by the scenarios the lower mind generates, the nous, the divine mind, the part of you that is made of the same substance as the light at the beginning. The problem is not that the lower mind is active. The problem is that we have never been taught to let the other mind be active too. Let your breath slow. Notice the air moving in and out. Imagine the lower mind as a river, constant movement, clear in its own kind of motion, useful when you need to travel somewhere. But right now, you are not traveling. And the Hermetic teaching says, above the river there is something still, not frozen, not empty. Still the way a deep lake is still, full, holding, not going anywhere. That stillness is available to you, not through effort, not by fighting the river, simply by allowing awareness to rest above the current of thought and staying there. Carl Jung observed something very similar when he noted that most psychological suffering comes not from the deep unknown, but from the overcrowded surface. Too many thoughts, too much analysis, too little capacity to step back from the thinking and see it. He called this one-sidedness. A person so dominated by the analytical function that the other parts of the psyche have no room to breathe. The Hermetic tradition would say too much lower mind, too little nous. And the remedy is not to silence the lower mind. The remedy is to remember that there is more than the lower mind, that beneath the river or above it, depending on your metaphor, something is always quietly present, waiting without impatience, the way a night sky waits behind the clouds. You have already encountered this in your own life, in quieter moments than this one. The thought that arrived not when you were trying to think, but when you stopped. The solution that appeared in the shower, in a walk, at the edge of sleep. The moment when you finally put down the problem you had been carrying and the answer surfaced on its own, gently, without force. That was not luck. That was the nous, the part of you that was attending to the deeper level all along, while the lower mind exhausted itself on the surface. And the Hermetic practice is simply the deliberate cultivation of those conditions. Not the shower, not the accident, the intentional pause. The willingness to stop adding and allow something to surface. This night is one of those conditions. The lower mind, tired from the day, is losing its grip. The river is quieting, and in the quieting, the sky begins to show through. It does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. It simply becomes visible as it always was. Beneath every rush of thought and worry and self-assessment, the sky was there, patient, clear, yours. Chapter 10. Mental Clarity Through Silence. There was a mathematician in 17th century France who lived in rooms with almost no furniture. His name was Blaise Pascal, and he spent years studying what happens when a brilliant mind is given nothing to do. What he found disturbed him. He wrote in a passage that became one of the most quoted sentences in European philosophy that nearly all of humanity's problems arise from a single source: our inability to sit quietly alone in a room. Pascal was not a Hermeticist. He was a mathematician and a deeply devout Catholic. But he had arrived at a Hermetic insight from a completely different direction. The mind in motion generates its own suffering. The mind in stillness discovers its own sufficiency. This is the pattern the Hermetic tradition pointed toward when it spoke about mental clarity. Not clarity as an achievement, something you produce through effort and discipline. Clarity as a revelation, something that appears when you stop producing. Picture a glass of water in which you have stirred sand. While the sand is stirring, the water is cloudy. You cannot see through it. No amount of stirring will make it clear. The only thing that will make it clear is stopping, letting the sand settle. The mind is like that water, and mental clarity is not an act. It is what happens when the act stops. Let your jaw soften. Let the next breath come without trying. The Hermetic tradition built specific practices around this insight, not forcing the mind into silence, which never works and only creates a new kind of agitation, but learning to create conditions in which silence can arrive on its own. These conditions included specific times of day, dawn and dusk, when the world naturally softens, night, which we are in now. They included specific postures of attention, not blank passivity, but a kind of receptive alertness, listening without directing, open without grasping, and they included a particular orientation toward thought. Not thought as enemy, to be fought or suppressed, thought as weather, to be noticed without being identified with. You are not your thoughts. This is something the Hermetic tradition shared with Buddhism, with Stoicism, with nearly every major wisdom tradition the ancient world produced. The thoughts arise. They pass. Something watches them passing. And that something, the witness, the awareness, the nous, is always already clear, always already quiet. Not quiet the way a room is quiet when it is empty. Quiet the way deep water is quiet, full of life, full of presence, undisturbed by the movement on the surface. The English poet and mystic Thomas Traherne, writing in the 17th century and deeply influenced by Hermetic ideas, described a moment of looking at an ordinary cornfield and suddenly perceiving it as glorious beyond any word. Not because the field had changed, because something had quieted in him enough to allow him to actually see it. Mental clarity, in the Hermetic sense, is that the capacity to actually see, without the screen of habitual interpretation, without the overlay of worry and planning and rehearsal, just seeing. And tonight, lying here, the conditions for that kind of seeing are as close as they ever get. The body is still. The day is complete. The mind, still running, is slowly losing its arguments. Let it run. Do not fight it. Just notice, gently, that something in you is already clear, already watching the thoughts move through, already quiet. Chapter 11. Anxiety before the infinite. There is a specific feeling that arises in certain people at certain moments. It is not quite fear, not quite awe, somewhere between the two. The feeling of standing at the edge of something immeasurably large, the edge of the ocean at night with the sound of waves you cannot see, or standing in a field under an open sky and feeling suddenly how small you are, or lying in bed and letting the mind range outward past the city, past the country, past the atmosphere, into the dark expanse that has no edge. This feeling has a name in philosophy, the sublime, and the Hermetic tradition understood it well, because the Hermetic tradition was, at its core, a tradition of people who had opened their minds to the full scale of the cosmos, who had actually tried to think their way to the edge of existence and look over, and who had to figure out how to live after that, not with denial, not with distraction, with something the tradition called wonder, and something else it called humility. But also, and this is the part most people miss, with something it called kinship, because the Hermetic teaching did not leave you standing alone at the edge. It said, the infinite is not other than you. You are not a small creature looking at something vast from a safe distance. You are a concentrated expression of that vastness. The feeling of being overwhelmed by the infinite is, in Hermetic terms, the lower mind confronting what the nous has always known. It is the finite trying to hold the infinite and finding it cannot. But the finite does not need to hold it. The infinite can hold the finite. Let your breathing slow. Feel the weight of your body being held. Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher who wrote so precisely about inner experience, described anxiety as the dizziness of freedom. The Hermetic tradition would have understood this perfectly. The human being in Hermetic thought stands at a peculiar threshold. Part matter, part spirit, part finite, part infinite, part bound by time, part touched by something that has no relation to time at all. This threshold position is not comfortable. It generates a specific kind of anxiety that is not about any particular problem. It is about the nature of existence itself. And the Hermetic answer is not to resolve the anxiety. It is to understand what it is. The anxiety at the edge of the infinite is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that you are awake to the full scale of what you are. A being large enough to feel the infinite, small enough to be bewildered by it, and wise enough, in certain moments, to stop fighting the bewilderment and let it open into something softer, something that might even be peace. There is a passage in the Hermetic texts where the seeker, having received the vision of the nous, is asked what he will do with it. He says, I will tell human beings to stop adding suffering to their lives. I will tell them that they are children of light. And then he begins. He goes out and starts talking, and some people listen and some people laugh, and he is not surprised. Because the Hermetic tradition always knew this. The vision is not easy to communicate. But for the ones who are ready to receive it, even a few words are enough. You are a child of light. In Hermetic thinking, this is not sentiment. It is as literal as the tradition could be. You began as nous, as divine mind, and somewhere along the way you forgot. The teaching is simply the reminder, and here is where the anxiety begins to soften. Not because the infinite becomes smaller, it does not, but because your relationship to it changes Think of a moment in your own life when you felt it. Not the anxiety, the other thing. The strange sensation of being held by something larger than you could name. Maybe you were outside after a long day. Maybe the sky was clear. Maybe you sat in the particular silence that follows difficult news, when the ordinary world seems briefly transparent and something else shows through. That moment was not an accident. The Hermetic tradition would say it was a moment of thin veil. A moment when the nous was close enough to the surface to be felt. And it did not feel like threat. It felt like recognition. The infinite is not indifferent to you. That is the teaching. It is what you are made of. And when the night anxiety comes, when the mind reaches outward and finds no edge and panics at the scale, there is a Hermetic answer available. Not a solution, a reorientation. You are not looking at the infinite from outside, you are it looking. And that distinction, held quietly in the dark, changes something in the chest. The bewilderment does not disappear, but it opens into something that might, tonight, be enough. Chapter 12, The Sacred Art of Correspondence. The Hermetic tradition loved patterns, not the surface patterns of daily life, the routines and habits that make the ordinary world manageable. The deep patterns, the ones that recur across scales. The same spiral that appears in a nautilus shell also appears in the arms of a galaxy. The same rhythm that governs the tides also governs the breath. The same polarity that organizes, a magnet also organizes in some form the movements of the psyche. These correspondences, these echoes of pattern across scale, were, for the Hermeticists, not metaphors. They were evidence. Evidence that the cosmos is built according to a single underlying logic, that the small and the large are versions of each other, that learning to see one is learning to see something about all of them. This is the sacred art of correspondence. And it is not primitive thinking. Some of the most sophisticated modern scientists have arrived at something very similar through completely different methods. The physicist David Bohm, one of the most original thinkers in 20th century quantum physics, spent years developing the idea of an implicate order, a hidden wholeness that underlies the visible, fragmented world. He was not a Hermeticist, but when scholars of Hermetic philosophy encountered Bohm, they recognized something familiar. The Hermetic tradition and the quantum physicist were circling the same territory from different directions. The world we see, the world of separate objects, separate events, separate people, may not be the deepest level of reality. Below that world, there may be a level of radical interconnectedness, a level at which the thing that happens in a distant star and the thing that happens in a human heart are not separate events at all. Let your breath come slowly. Let your eyes stay closed. What does this mean for ordinary life? It means that how you attend to your own inner life is not a purely private matter. In the Hermetic understanding, the quality of your attention, the clarity or confusion of your inner world moves outward. not through any mystical mechanism, through the most ordinary one. The way you are inside changes how you perceive the world. How you perceive the world changes how you respond to it. How you respond changes what happens next. Correspondence moves in both directions. And when a person has lost the thread of their inner life, when the lower mind is running constantly but the nous is never consulted, the correspondences collapse. The world becomes flat. Events seem random. Life feels like a series of things happening to a passive self, without pattern, without meaning. This is not because meaning has disappeared. It is because the instrument for perceiving meaning has gone quiet. And the Hermetic remedy is always the same. Turn inward first. Restore the quality of your attention. And watch the correspondences begin to reappear. Not through magic, through attention. The pattern was always there. You are just learning to see it again. Consider what this means in the small hours of the night. Your mind, at this moment, may be circling a worry. It may be rehearsing a conversation. It may be replaying a moment from years ago as if revising it could change the outcome. This is the lower mind doing what the lower mind does. But beneath that, there is a quality of awareness that is not circling. It is simply present. You can feel it right now if you pause long enough. Not the thoughts, the thing that is watching the thoughts. The still point around which the circling moves. That still point is your access to the nous. And the nous reads patterns. The mind that worries is looking at individual events. This problem, that regret, this uncertainty. It cannot see the larger picture because it is standing too close. The nous steps back, and from that distance, patterns appear. Not necessarily comforting patterns, not always neat or resolved, but patterns that suggest order, continuity. A shape to things that the anxious mind, too close to its own noise, cannot perceive. Let your attention ease now, not toward anything in particular, just ease. The correspondence that matters most tonight is this one. The same quality of attention that notices the spiral in a shell can notice the shape of your own life. The same stillness that allows you to hear music in its entirety, not just individual notes, allows you to hear your life in its entirety. And from that vantage, the individual notes that seemed wrong or too sharp or unresolved, they begin slowly to find their place. Chapter 13. The Ladder of the Spheres. Let us take a journey that the Hermetic tradition imagined in great detail. A journey inward, or upward, depending on how you orient yourself. The ancient world imagined the cosmos as a series of nested spheres. At the center was the Earth. Around it moved the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Beyond all of them, the sphere of the fixed stars. And beyond that, the unmoving source. The soul, in Hermetic teaching, descended through these spheres to be born into a human body. And on that descent, it picked something up at each level. From the moon, the power of growth and change. From Mercury, the gift of reason and language. From Venus, desire and the longing for beauty. From the Sun, vitality and will. From Mars, urgency and drive. From Jupiter, wisdom and generosity. From Saturn, seriousness and memory. These are the gifts of matter, the qualities that make a human life specific, particular, located in time and in a body. But the Hermetic tradition said something else. It said, the same qualities that were gifts on the way down become weights on the way up. The capacity for desire, which allows you to love and seek and connect, can become the compulsion to grasp at things that cannot satisfy. The capacity for reason, which allows you to think clearly and navigate the world, can become the prison of overthinking. The seriousness and memory that help you learn from experience can become the heaviness of a mind that cannot stop reviewing the past. Let your breathing slow. Notice the weight of your body. The Hermetic ladder of ascent is not a physical journey. It is an interior one. And the ascent begins not by discarding these qualities, but by understanding them, by seeing which of Saturn's gifts has become Saturn's weight, by recognizing where the capacity for reason has tipped into rumination, where the desire for connection has become the anxiety of never quite connecting, where the seriousness of memory has become the burden of a story you cannot stop telling. The ladder of the spheres is a map of the interior, not a map of the sky. And climbing it, in the Hermetic sense, means progressively releasing what is no longer serving you, not through force, through clarity. When you see that a particular thought pattern is not reason but rumination, something loosens. When you see that a particular longing is not love but grasping, something releases. The seeing is the climbing. And tonight, lying here with the mind slowly softening its grip, you are already several rungs higher than you were this morning, not through effort, through stillness. This is the Hermetic secret at the center of the ladder. The ascent is not a climbing, it is a letting go. And each thing you release reveals a part of you that was always already above it. Think of what you have already released tonight, simply by being still, the urgency of the day, the performance of competence, the management of how you appear to others. In the stillness of this hour, none of that is required, and without it, something comes through, not a more spiritual version of yourself, just a cleaner one, a quieter one with less to carry. A woman who had spent 40 years in demanding professional work once described the first morning of her retirement this way. She said the silence was terrifying for about 3 days. And then it was like taking off a coat she had been wearing so long she had forgotten it was there. Underneath, she said, was someone she recognized. Someone who had always been there. She did not call it news. She would not have known the word. But the Hermeticists would have understood exactly what she meant. There are layers, and beneath all of them there is something that does not change, that does not age, that does not get tired, that looks out through your eyes tonight with the same quality it has always had. And the ladder is simply the practice of returning to it, rung by rung, night by night, letting go of what is not, finally, you. Chapter 14. The Body as Temple. There is a word that appears in the Hermetic texts again and again: sanctified, sacred, set apart for a particular purpose. And the thing most often described in these terms is not a temple made of stone. It is the body. This surprises people. The Hermetic tradition is sometimes assumed to be hostile to the body, a tradition of pure spirit, of escape from matter, of transcendence above the physical. But the deeper texts tell a different story. Yes, the Hermetic soul seeks ascent. Yes, the tradition is oriented toward the divine mind above the material world. But it also recognizes something that more purely spiritual traditions sometimes miss. The body is not the enemy of the spirit. The body is the place where the spirit becomes particular, where the infinite becomes specific, where the divine mind takes on weight and breath and hunger and the ability to touch another person's hand. The Latin. Hermetic text, called the Asclepius, contains a remarkable passage. It describes the human being as the greatest wonder of all created things. Not because humans are powerful, not because they are rational, but because they are double. They carry within themselves both the material and the divine. They are the only beings in the cosmos that can move freely between both dimensions. Stones are purely material. The divine mind is purely spiritual. But the human being, this strange, particular, embodied creature, is both. And, in being both, becomes a bridge. Let your awareness move to wherever your body feels heaviest right now. Maybe your legs, maybe your lower back, maybe the back of your head against the pillow. This body that you have sometimes fought with, that has not always done what you asked, that has aged in ways you did not choose. That carries a particular kind of tiredness that a good night's sleep does not always fix. This body is, in the Hermetic understanding, a sacred vessel. Not because it is perfect, because it is the form through which awareness meets the world. Paracelsus, the 16th century physician who worked at the edge of medicine and Hermetic philosophy, believed that healing the body required understanding it as a cosmos in miniature, that the physician who understood the stars could understand the organs, that the healer who worked with the patient's inner life was working with the physical symptoms too. This was a recognition that the human being is not divided into a physical part and a mental part that happen to share a patient. Skull. The human being is one system, and that system works best when all its levels are attended to. Tonight, lying still, your body is doing something remarkable. It is breathing without being asked to breathe, regulating temperature, moving blood, restoring cells without a single conscious instruction from you. It knows things you do not know. And the Hermetic tradition would say that knowing is not accidental. It is the nous, working through matter, the divine mind dreaming itself into particular form, your particular form, which is, for that reason, worth caring for gently. There is a man who comes to mind here. Someone in his late 50s who had spent decades treating his body as a tool, pushing it through long hours, poor sleep, meals eaten standing at a desk. He was efficient. He accomplished a great deal. And then, one evening, his body stopped cooperating. Nothing dramatic, just a persistent exhaustion that no amount of rest seemed to fix. A dull ache that moved and would not name itself. A signal. He went to several doctors. The tests came back unremarkable. And then, slowly, he began to realize the tests were not looking in the right place. The body was not broken. The body was asking to be listened to. He began, cautiously, with small things. A walk in the morning, sitting in silence after dinner. Noticing once a day where his body felt tense without being asked to hold tension. And over months, something shifted, not the body, his relationship to it. The Hermetic teaching he would never have called by that name had arrived through necessity. The body is not a vehicle for the mind to ride in. It is part of the system. It holds things the mind cannot bear to acknowledge. It speaks in sensations the lower mind often talks over. Listening to the body is a Hermetic practice. It is turning inward. It is correspondence made physical. And it is available to you right now. Let your body be heavy. Let it be held by what is beneath you. It knows how to rest. You only need to stop overriding it. Chapter 15, Fate, Freedom, Necessity. One of the oldest questions in philosophy, are you free? Or is everything already determined by your past, by your biology, by the stars, by forces larger than any individual choice? The Hermetic tradition did not offer a simple answer. It offered something more useful, a distinction. There are things that are subject to fate, the texts say, and there are things that are subject to freedom. The body is subject to fate. It will age. It will encounter illness. It will one day cease to function. The circumstances of birth are subject to fate. You did not choose your family, your country, your century. Many of the events of an ordinary life are subject to fate. The larger movements of history, the weather of the soul, the things that arrive without invitation. But the inner life, the quality of your attention, the direction of your will, the relationship between your lower mind and your nous, this is subject to freedom. This is almost exactly the Stoic distinction between what is in our control and what is not. Epictetus, the former enslaved man who became one of the most influential Stoic teachers of the ancient world, organized his entire philosophy around this single observation. Some things are up to you. Some things are not. The Stoics and the Hermeticists were contemporaries in Alexandria. They read each other, they argued with each other, and on this particular point they agreed. External events are not fully within your control, but the relationship you have with your own mind is: let your jaw soften. Let the next breath come without any effort. Now, there is one more layer to this, and it is where the Hermetic tradition goes beyond the Stoic one. The Stoics said, cultivate virtue, and you will be free regardless of circumstances. The Hermeticists said, yes, and also, as you cultivate your inner life, you gradually align with the deeper pattern of the cosmos. And when you align with that pattern, the boundary between fate and freedom begins to soften, not because you become able to control the world, but because you stop needing to. There is a freedom on the other side of the struggle to control, not the freedom of having arranged everything to your satisfaction, not the freedom of having escaped difficulty, the freedom of being in right relationship with what is. And the curious thing about this kind of freedom is that it does not feel like the freedom most people are searching for. It feels more like rest, not passive rest, not giving up, but the deep rest of a person who has stopped fighting the river, who has understood the river, and is now moving with it. That rest is closer tonight than it was this morning, and closer in this hour of stillness than in any hour of effort. You have felt this distinction before, even if you did not have words for it. The moments when you stopped trying to fix something and it quietly resolved. The relationship that improved not because you worked harder at it, but because you stopped pressing it toward a shape it was not. The worry you carried for weeks, and then one morning it was simply lighter, not because anything had changed, but because you had. The Hermetic tradition is describing something you already know through lived experience, that there are two ways to move through difficulty. One is to grip harder, to strategize, to force, to will your way through. The other is to align, to stop fighting the larger pattern, to trust that your intelligent attention, applied steadily and without panic, is itself the most powerful instrument available to you, not passive, not helpless, simply in right relationship with what is. And from that alignment, something the Hermeticists called gnosis becomes possible. Not intellectual knowledge, not information, but direct knowing, the kind that arrives when the noise stops long enough for the deeper signal to come through, the kind that feels less like learning something and more like remembering. And this hour, this darkness, this particular quality of quiet, these are the conditions in which that kind of knowing is most available. Not because you are trying, because you have, for once, stopped. Chapter 16, The Secret of Polarity. Here is something the mind does at night. It divides. This is good, that is bad, this situation is threatening, that one is safe. This person is trustworthy, that one is not. The mind is a dividing instrument. It separates, categorizes, compares, contrasts. This is one of its most essential functions. Without it, you could not navigate a day. But the Hermetic tradition points to something the dividing mind tends to miss. What if good and bad are not opposites? What if they are different degrees of the same thing? This is the principle of polarity. The idea that what appears to be polar opposition, hot and cold, light and dark, love and fear, expansion and contraction is better understood as a spectrum. Two ends of one pole. Not two separate realities, but two extremes of a continuum. Hot and cold are not different things. They are different degrees of temperature. Light and dark are not different realities. They are different intensities of illumination. And here is what changes when you hold this view. If love and fear are not opposites but different points on the same scale, then fear is not the enemy of love. Fear is love that has contracted, that has drawn inward in the presence of perceived threat, and love is fear that has opened, that has found enough safety to expand. The movement from fear to love is not a leap across a chasm. It is a gradual shift along a spectrum, and the implication is profound. You do not fight fear. You open it, not by telling it to be gone, but by gently expanding the context it lives in, by making the space slightly larger, by remembering, and this is the Hermetic move, that the fear is happening inside something that is not afraid. Let your body settle. Let the breath deepen slightly. The Hermetic thinkers applied this principle everywhere. To the movements of history, periods of destruction are part of the same movement as periods of renewal. One extreme generates its opposite. To the life of the individual, the years of contraction and difficulty are part of the same arc as the years of expansion and ease. To the night, the darkness is part of the same continuum as the light. And in the darkness, something grows that cannot grow in the daylight. This last point is not metaphor. Seeds germinate in the dark. Stars are only visible in the dark. The deepest parts of the ocean, where life thrives in forms that never see the sun, exist only in absolute darkness. And the interior life of a human being tends to deepen during the dark periods. Not despite the difficulty, through it. The years you would not choose, the ones you might call the hardest years, the years you survived rather than enjoyed. Those years, the Hermetic principle of polarity says, are not simply lost, they are the dark end of a spectrum that includes the light you now carry. That carries you tonight. Consider how this lands in the experience of your own harder years, the years you would not have chosen, the ones that cost you something real, a relationship, a career, a version of yourself that you had to leave behind. Those years did not only take, they also left something, a quality of depth that is not available without cost, a certain steadiness that people who have not been tested rarely carry, a capacity for compassion toward others in difficulty, because you know from the inside what difficulty feels like. The principle of polarity does not ask you to be grateful for what was hard. Gratitude requires time and distance. It cannot be forced. It asks only this, that you hold the possibility that the dark end of the spectrum is part of the same thing as the light end, that the years of contraction seen from far enough away will turn out to have been part of a larger expansion, that what the lower mind called loss may, from the perspective of the nous, be something more nuanced. Not every dark period resolves into light. The Hermetic tradition was not naive, but it did insist that the cosmos is not randomly cruel, that even the difficult movements belong to a larger rhythm, and that the human being who learns to hold this, not as a comforting fiction, but as a genuine orientation toward experience, lives with a different quality of inner steadiness. Not because less happens to them, because what happens to them meets a different quality of receiving. Chapter 17. Rhythm in all things listen, not to any particular sound, to the rhythm that underlies all sounds, the rhythm of your breath in and out, expanding and releasing, the rhythm of the heartbeat felt in the body as a subtle pulse, the rhythm of thought arising and passing, arising and passing. The ancient Hermetic teachers believed that rhythm is not something imposed on reality from outside. It is the nature of reality itself. Everything moves in cycles. The tides, the seasons, the night and day, the contraction and expansion of empires, the gathering and releasing of individual lives. Everything pulses, and the being who understands this, who stops fighting the contraction phase and stops clinging to the expansion phase, lives differently from the being who does not. They live with a different relationship to time. Picture a person who has discovered through years of living that energy naturally rises and falls throughout the day, that there are times of clarity and times of fog, times of creativity and times of dormancy. A younger version of that person might fight the fog, push through the dormancy, interpret the contractions as failures. The older version, the one who has lived enough rhythms to begin to trust them, does something different. They rest in the contractions. They wait without panic. They have learned from the season of winter that the apparently dead ground is not dead. It is resting. Let your breath find its own rhythm. You do not need to slow it or deepen it. Just notice the rhythm that is already there. The Hermetic tradition observed that the wisdom traditions of every culture had, independently, arrived at this same insight. The Taoist teachers in ancient China spoke of Wu Wei, action that flows with the natural rhythm rather than against it. the ease that comes from not forcing. The Buddhist teachers spoke of impermanence, not as a tragedy, but as the very texture of existence. That clinging to any state, pleasant or unpleasant, is what generates suffering. The Stoics spoke of loving what unfolds, not resisting the rhythm of fate, but moving with it. And the Hermetic tradition, synthesizing many of these streams, said, "The rhythm is the language of the cosmos. Learning to hear it is the beginning of wisdom, and learning to move with it, even when the movement carries you through dark passages, is the practice of a psalm lifetime." Tonight, the rhythm is moving you toward sleep. That is not weakness. That is not defeat. It is the cosmos pulsing through a particular point of awareness. And the wisest thing that point of awareness can do is surrender to the rhythm, not with resignation, with trust. The same rhythm that moves through everything else moves through you, and it knows where it is going. You have already felt this. The nights when the harder you tried to sleep, the wider awake you became. And then the nights when you stopped trying, and sleep arrived quietly, without announcement. The rhythm did not change. Your relationship to it did. This is the whole lesson in miniature. There is a teacher in the Taoist tradition who described it this way. He said, "A good swimmer does not fight the current. They read it. They find the movement within the movement, and they go where the river was already going, only faster, only more easily." The Hermetic principle of rhythm is not a call to passivity. It is a call to intelligence about when to push and when to allow, when to act and when to wait, when the moment is ripe and when it is not yet ready. This kind of intelligence is not something you can think your way into. It develops over years of paying attention, of getting it wrong and noticing, of getting it right and noticing that too. And at 50 or 60 or 70, you have more of this intelligence than you did at 30, even if you do not name it, even if it arrived without a teacher. The years themselves were the teacher, and what they taught you, that there is a rhythm to things, that forcing rarely works, that patience has a power that urgency cannot match. This is the Hermetic principle of rhythm. Lived, earned, yours. Chapter 18, Cause, Effect, and Character. There is a principle so embedded in how we think that most people never question it. Every effect has a cause. This seems obvious, almost trivially true. But the Hermetic tradition looked at it from a different angle. If every effect has a cause, and every cause is itself the effect of a prior cause, then what you are right now, this particular combination of qualities, habits, responses, fears, loves, tendencies, is the effect of causes stretching back through your entire life. Every experience that shaped you, every relationship that formed you, every decision, small and large, that gradually became the person lying here tonight. This could be a paralyzing thought. If you are entirely the product of prior causes, what is left for freedom? But the Hermetic tradition made a subtle and important move here. It said, character is cause. The quality of who you are, the accumulated pattern of your choices and attentions, this is not merely an effect, it is itself a cause, a powerful one. And while you cannot go back and change the causes that made you what you are, you can, starting now, starting in the next breath, add new causes to the chain. The Stoics had a similar insight. They called it the power of choice, the inner stance that mediates between what happens to you and what you become. You cannot control what happens, but you can, with practice, shape how you respond. And the shaped response becomes the next cause, and the next cause shapes the next effect. Character, in this view, is not destiny. It is the present cause of your future. Let your breath settle. Notice how still the body is right now. This idea matters deeply for the experience of lying awake at night, running through regrets. The Hermetic tradition would say, yes, review what has passed, notice the causes and effects, learn from the pattern, and then set it down. Not because the past is unimportant, but because the past is past. The only cause you have access to is the present one, the quality of your attention right now, the tone with which you hold your own experience tonight, the small choice, barely visible even to yourself, about whether to keep gripping or to slowly open. These are causes, and the Hermetic tradition believed, and experience confirms, that small causes applied consistently compound. The gentle shift in attention repeated night after night, the small choosing of a softer inner voice, the incremental practice of not adding suffering to suffering. These are not dramatic transformations. They are quiet causes, but over time, their effects are very large indeed. Think of someone you know, or perhaps a version of yourself, who went through a long, difficult season and came out the other side with something the difficulty could not take. Not tougher. That is not quite the right word. More seasoned, more honest, less easily fooled by the surface of things. The Hermetic tradition would say that person had become, through their experience, a more powerful cause in the chain of their own life, not because they forced a transformation, because the difficulty applied a kind of pressure that over time refined the quality of who they were, character as cause. And the refinement continues, even now, even in this quiet room, even in the seemingly passive act of lying still and letting the mind settle. Because what you are choosing right now, to be soft rather than hard with yourself, to let tonight be what it is rather than what it should have been, to rest without guilt in the permission that the dark gives, these are causes, small ones, almost invisible, but they are building something, not dramatically, not in a way you will notice tomorrow morning, but over the months and years of a life that keeps choosing, gently, to attend to its own quality, the effects become unmistakable. Let your breath be slow. Let your hands be open. You are already making the choice that matters most tonight. The choice to be gentle with what you find when you turn inward. Chapter 19. The Alchemy of Attention. Most people think of alchemy as the attempt to turn lead into gold. This is true at one level. But the Hermetic tradition, from which alchemy springs, always understood the outer work as a mirror for an inner one. The lead that must be transformed is not a metal, it is the unexamined, reactive, fear-driven quality of the ordinary mind. The gold that is sought is not a substance. It is the quality of awareness that the Hermetic tradition calls the nous, the clear, free, compassionate divine mind that the human being carries but rarely inhabits. The alchemical transformation is not chemical, it is attentional. And attention, how you place it, how you hold it, what you allow it to rest on, is the most powerful transformative instrument available to a human being. The psychologist William James, one of the founders of American psychology, wrote in the late 19th century that the greatest discovery of his generation was that human beings could alter their outer lives by altering the inner attitudes of their minds. He arrived at this through empirical observation, through watching patients, through his own life of depression and hard-won recovery. But the Hermetic tradition had said the same thing in different language 17 centuries earlier. Attention transforms, not through willpower, not through relentless effort, through sustained, gentle, receptive quality. Let your attention settle now, not on any problem, not on anything that needs to be solved, just on the feeling of being here, of being a body in a room, in a night, in a life that has taken many years to arrive at this particular moment. The Hermeticists practiced what they called the upward journey of attention, beginning with the lowest, most reactive quality of the mind, the anxious, judging, grasping surface attention, and slowly, without forcing, allowing it to rise to a level of attention that is interested rather than anxious, to a level that is open rather than grasping, to a level that is quietly clear rather than constantly evaluating. Each level is not the abandonment of the level below it, it is the transformation of it. Anxiety, when the quality of attention rises, does not disappear. It becomes alertness, aliveness, the sensitivity that notices what is real. Grasping, when the quality of attention rises, does not disappear. It becomes appreciation, the capacity to receive beauty without needing to keep it. This is the alchemy, lead becoming gold, not through destruction, but through transformation. The base metals are not thrown away, they are refined. And the attention that does the refining is available to you right now, in this quiet hour, in this room, in this night that is doing nothing except holding you. There is a man who spent most of his working life in logistics, moving things from place to place, managing supply chains, keeping the visible machinery of commerce running. He retired at 64. And in the first months, he found he could not be still. The same intelligence that had made him excellent at his work, the constant scanning for problems, the anticipation of breakdowns, the restless problem-solving would not turn off. He sat in his garden and found himself mentally reorganizing it for efficiency. He went for walks and found himself categorizing what he saw. The attention, he said, had been trained so thoroughly to evaluate that it had lost the capacity to simply receive. He did not discover Hermetic philosophy. He discovered, through a friend, a Tai Chi practice. And through the practice, the attention gradually learned a different quality. Not the evaluating attention, the receptive one. What the Hermeticists would call the nous-aligned attention. The one that does not immediately sort everything into problems and solutions. The one that simply rests in what is. He described the shift as strange at first, and then as something he could not imagine having missed. You may recognize something of yourself in that, the scanning mind that cannot put itself to rest. And if you do, the Hermetic invitation is a gentle one, not to stop thinking, but to hold the thinking a little more lightly, to let there be, beneath the activity of the mind, something that does not evaluate, that simply watches. That is the gold the alchemists were seeking. It has been here all along. Chapter 20, The Fire of Purification. There is a moment in the alchemical process that the old texts describe with both fear and wonder, the moment of intense heat. In the outer work of the alchemist, this was a literal process, heating the matter until it broke down into its essential components. In the inner work, this moment meant something different. The application of honest attention so sustained, so clear, so patient, that the false structures of the self could not survive it. Not punishment, not self-criticism. Not the grinding kind of self-examination that makes you feel worse with every pass, something quieter than that. The fire of purification in Hermetic thought is not aggressive. It is the gentle, patient fire of awareness that does not look away. There is something in every human life that has been built for appearance rather than truth. A face we learn to present when we sense that our real face would not be welcomed. A voice we adopted when we understood that our real voice was too much or too little or simply the wrong kind. These constructions are not failures, they are survival strategies. Intelligent responses to real pressures. But they accumulate. And at some point, the weight of what has been constructed begins to exceed the weight of what is real. And the person finds themselves often in middle life, often in a quiet season, often lying awake at night, with a persistent sense that something needs to change, that the person they present to the world is not quite the person they feel themselves to be. The Hermetic fire does not destroy the constructed self, it illuminates it. And in the illumination, the person begins to see which parts of the construction are still serving them, and which parts have outlived their purpose. Let your breath come slowly. Let the body be heavy. There is no performance required right now, no face to maintain, no voice to modulate, just the particular human being that you are in a room in the dark. The fire of purification is very gentle in moments like this, because the moment you stop performing, even for a few minutes, the thing that is real in you comes a little closer to the surface, not dressed up, not edited, just present. And the Hermetic tradition says this is not a small thing, this is the beginning of the work. To know what is real in you, not through dramatic revelation, through the quiet accumulation of moments like this one. Moments when the performing stops and the real thing breathes. This moment is one of those moments, not because anything dramatic has happened, because something has been removed. The day's obligations, the social performance, the ongoing calculation of how you are doing relative to how you think you should be doing, all of that is on pause. And what remains, this quiet, slightly tired, slightly open person in a dark room, is closer to your actual self than most of your waking hours allow. The Hermetic tradition would call this access, a moment of contact with the real beneath the constructed. And the invitation is simply to notice it, not to do anything with it, not to draw conclusions or make resolutions, just to notice. This is here, this is real. This particular quality of being, tired, yes, but also somehow clear, is not something you put on. It is something you find when you take off what you usually wear. The years of accumulation are real. The things you carry are real, but they are not the deepest thing. The deepest thing is whatever is noticing them. And tonight, in the space between one breath and the next, you can feel it, steady, still, unbothered by what the day required. That is the part the fire cannot touch. That is the gold. Chapter 21. The Sleep of Forgetfulness. Here is one of the most poignant ideas in the Hermetic tradition. The soul descending through the planetary spheres into material existence passes through a veil. And on the other side of that veil, it forgets. It forgets its origin. It forgets the quality of light it came from. It forgets the sound of the deeper world. And it wakes up in a body, in a particular time and place, with no memory of what it knew before. The ancient Gnostic and Neoplatonist traditions called this the sleep of forgetfulness, and they were not romantic about it. It was, in their telling, the source of much of human suffering, not a punishment, not a design flaw. Simply the price of becoming particular, To be a specific human being in a specific body with a specific history and a specific death ahead is to have traded the fullness of the original awareness for the richness of a particular life. And most of us, most of the time, are asleep to the trade we have made. We know we are this person. This name, this face, this set of problems and pleasures. We do not know, most of the time, that we are also something larger than this person. But the knowing is not gone. It is sleeping. And certain experiences wake it up. Great beauty, great loss, deep love, the edge of death, the moment of perfect stillness. And sometimes this is what the Hermetic tradition quietly promises, even a long, patient conversation in the dark. Let your breath settle. Notice the weight of your body. Think of a moment in your own life when something broke through the ordinary. Not necessarily dramatic. Maybe just a morning with extraordinary light. A piece of music that seemed to say something the music itself could not say. A moment with another person when the ordinary conversation suddenly opened into something deeper, and both of you felt it. These are not accidents. These are the moments when the veil of forgetfulness thins, when the soul, still living inside its particular history, suddenly remembers, just for a moment, the fullness it came from. The Hermetic word for this remembering is anamnesis, a Greek word that means, literally, unforgetting. And the Hermetic project, the whole elaborate structure of philosophy and practice and inner work, is in service of this one thing, not enlightenment in the dramatic sense, not the escape from the human condition, simply this, unforgetting, remembering gradually what the sleep of matter caused you to forget. Not all at once. That would be more than the ordinary mind could hold, but slowly, in accumulated moments of clarity and stillness, like tonight, when the day's performance has finally quieted, and something older than your history is here, in this room, breathing through you. That something has not forgotten. It has been waiting for the noise to quiet enough to be heard. And here is what is worth sitting with, gently, before moving on. The sleep of forgetfulness is not your fault. It is not a moral failing. It is not evidence of a weak mind or a shallow heart. It is what happens to every human being who descends into a particular body, a particular family, a particular set of circumstances that demand most of the available attention just to navigate. You were not given the luxury of spending your days in contemplation. You were living. You were working. You were raising children, or caring for parents, or building something, or surviving something, or simply getting through seasons that required all of you. The forgetting was practical, and the remembering does not undo any of it. The years of full immersion in the particular, in the specific demands and loves and losses of your specific life, those years were not wasted by forgetting. They were, in a hermetic sense, the experience. The soul did not descend in order to avoid the weight of matter. It descended in order to know it from the inside, to learn through particularity what could not be learned in pure spirit. And now, in this quiet room, with the particular demands of this particular day finally at rest, there is space for the other thing, the thing that does not belong to any particular day. That simply is listening. Chapter 22. Remembering the Divine Origin. We have been talking about forgetting. Let us now talk about its opposite. There is a tradition that runs through every major wisdom culture the world has produced. The tradition says, the deepest peace a human being can access is not made, it is remembered, not reconstructed, not built through effort, not arrived at through technique, remembered, recognized, as something that was always already the case. This is what the Hermetic tradition was pointing toward in all its elaborate language about spheres and correspondences and the divine mind. It was pointing toward a recognition that is available to any human being who grows still enough to receive it. The recognition that what you are, at the deepest level beneath the history and the habits and the plans, is not separate from the source of all things, that the nous, the divine mind, the light that was before all created things, is not something outside you that you are trying to reach. It is what you are made of. And forgetting this is the root of the specific restlessness that lies beneath all other restlessness. The restlessness of a creature that has lost its way home. Not lost in the geographical sense, lost in the sense of having forgotten where home is. And the remembering does not require a journey. It requires a shift of attention from what you are doing to what you are, from the content of the mind to the awareness that holds the content, from the river of thought to the stillness in which the river flows. Let your body settle completely. Let the breath happen without your involvement. For just a moment, without trying to think or feel or understand anything, notice that you are aware, not aware of anything in particular, just aware. That quality of awareness, simple, effortless, prior to any thought or image, is the closest thing available to you right now of what the Hermetic tradition means by the nous. It is not a distant, cosmic thing. It is here. It is you. It has been you all along. Every moment of calm you have ever felt was this. Every moment of clarity, every moment of simply being present without needing to be anywhere else. Not something you produced. Something you uncovered. By momentarily ceasing to produce, the Hermetic tradition spent centuries building an elaborate ladder of philosophy and practice to arrive at this recognition. And the recognition itself is this simple. You are aware. And the awareness is well. Whatever else is happening, the history, the worries, the unresolved things, the awareness in which they are happening is not troubled by them. It holds them the way the sky holds clouds, without being defined by them, without being limited by them, and without ever needing them to be different from what they are. You have touched this before, not in any grand spiritual context. In the ordinary moments when you stopped unexpectedly and felt it. Standing in a garden in the late afternoon, watching the light change on something ordinary. A fence, a tree, a pattern of shadow, and feeling for no reason a sudden quiet. Not happy, exactly. Not peaceful in any effortful way, just present, just here, just this. That quality, the one that arrives without being summoned, the one that does not need anything to be different. That is what the Hermetic tradition spent 2,000 years trying to point toward. And you already know what it feels like. You have always known. The unforgetting is not the acquisition of something new. It is the recognition of something old. Something so old it preceded your birth. Something so familiar it feels like home, even though you have never been taught its name. In the Hermetic understanding, this recognition is available to every human being, not just the learned, not just the philosophically trained. Any person of any background who grows still enough to stop running from the quiet. Tonight, you are that person. In this room, in this dark, in this breath. The awareness is here, and it is well. Chapter 23, Tat and the Search Within. In the 13th dialogue of the Corpus Hermeticum, something remarkable happens. A young man named Tat comes to his teacher, Hermes, his father in the spiritual sense, with a confession. He says, "I do not understand. You spoke of rebirth. You told me I would need to be born again. But I do not understand what this means or how it happens." And Hermes says, "This cannot be taught in the ordinary way, Tat. I can only point toward it. You must come to it yourself." Tat presses him. He is young, he is earnest, he wants instructions, a method, a technique. Hermes says, "Be still and receive," and Tat tries. And something happens. Not a dramatic transformation, not a vision of light and fire, a quiet shift. The qualities of the lower mind, the anxieties, the small judgments, the grasping, grow still. And in the stillness, something rises. Something that was always present but had no room. Tat says, "I am. I do not know what else to say. Something has happened, but I cannot name it." And Hermes says, "What you cannot name is the truth." This is one of the most psychologically precise moments in all of ancient philosophy, because it describes something that does not happen in books, that does not happen in lectures, that only happens in the interior, in stillness, in a moment of genuine receptivity. The shift from knowing about the divine mind to having some direct, if fleeting, contact with it. Let your jaw soften, let your hands open. Tat's question is every serious person's question. Not, "Tell me more about the theory," but, "How does this actually happen in me?" And the Hermetic answer is always the same. It happens in the space created by stillness, by the willingness to stop performing knowledge and simply be present, the psychologist James Hillman, who worked deeply with Jungian and Hermetic ideas, spent his career pointing towards something similar. He was suspicious of therapeutic methods that produced insight through clever interpretation. What he was after was something more elusive, a shift in the quality of awareness itself, not a new thought about oneself, but a new way of being with oneself. He believed, and the Hermetic tradition agrees, that this kind of shift cannot be forced. It can only be invited. And the invitation looks like this: a room at night, a body at rest, a mind that has exhausted its commentary for the moment, and a quality of presence that is simply here, not waiting for anything, not trying to produce anything, just here. That is the search Tat was engaged in. And you, tonight, are somewhere on the same path. Not at the beginning, further along than you might think. Because the search Tat describes, the longing for something beyond information, beyond intellectual mastery, beyond the accumulation of correct ideas about the divine, is not a search most people even undertake. Most people never sense that there is something to search for. The fact that you have been sitting with these ideas, even half asleep, even while the mind wanders to tomorrow's concerns and the body grows heavy and the breathing slows, this is the search, not the dramatic spiritual journey of someone who leaves everything behind to find a teacher. The quieter search, the one conducted in ordinary rooms, in ordinary bodies, at the end of ordinary days. The one that happens between one breath and the next. Hillman wrote that the soul makes itself known through imaginal moments, through images that arrive unbidden, through sudden recognitions that carry more weight than any reasoning could account for. You have had these. The moment something you read suddenly felt personally addressed to you, the dream that lingered, the conversation that landed differently than you expected. These are the moments Tat was pointing toward when he said, "Something has happened, but I cannot name it." The Hermetic tradition does not ask you to name it. It asks only that you stay open to it. Tonight, in this particular quiet, the door is open. Whatever comes through does not need a name. It only needs to be received. Chapter 24. Asclepius and Sacred Speech. There is another important student in the Hermetic dialogues. Asclepius, not the Greek god of medicine, though the names connect intentionally. Asclepius in the Hermetic texts is a student, a seeker, a person genuinely trying to understand what the teacher is pointing toward. And in the Latin Hermetic text named for him, there is a discussion that feels startlingly modern. The topic is speech, language, the relationship between words and reality. Hermes tells Asclepius that there is ordinary speech, the kind we use to manage the day, to exchange information, to keep the social world functioning. And there is sacred speech. Sacred speech is not a special vocabulary. It is not a set of prayers or formulas or incantations. Sacred speech is language that carries awareness with it, language in which the speaker is truly present to what they are saying, where the words are not simply labels attached to concepts, but genuine attempts to point towards something real. The difference between ordinary speech and sacred speech, Hermes says, is not what is said. It is the quality of attention in the one who says it. This is a radical idea, because it means that the most ordinary sentence, spoken with genuine presence, is sacred speech, and the most elaborate philosophical discourse, spoken mechanically, is nothing. Let your breath settle. Let the night be quiet around you. Think about the conversations that have mattered most in your life, not necessarily the most eloquent ones, not the ones with the most information, the ones where you felt genuinely met, where the other person was actually present, where they were listening not just to the words you were saying, but to whatever was behind the words. Those conversations were, in the Hermetic sense, sacred speech. And you have had them. In moments of real connection. In moments of crisis, when someone sat with you without trying to fix anything. In moments of simple honesty that arrived without preparation. The Hermetic tradition says this quality of speech, genuinely present, genuinely attentive, is a practice, not a talent some people have and others do not, a practice. And like all practices, it begins with the willingness to try, to slow down enough to mean what you say, to listen carefully enough to hear what is being said, to let the exchange be real rather than performed. The relationship between the language we use about our inner life and the quality of our inner life is tighter than most people realize. The Hermetic tradition understood this. When you change the language you use about your own experience, when you stop calling yourself broken and start calling yourself in process, something shifts. Not because the words are magic, because the words are attention. And attention transforms. There is something worth sitting with here in your own life. The language you have used to describe yourself to yourself in the private conversation that never stops has shaped the quality of your experience more than you may have realized. The words you reached for when things went wrong, the labels you applied in the moments of harshest self-judgment. These were not neutral, they were causes. And the Hermetic principle of sacred speech suggests that what you say about your own inner life is a kind of practice, not positive thinking, not affirmations that paste a pleasant surface over a difficult reality, something more honest than that. The practice of choosing language that is true and also spacious, that names difficulty without reducing you to it, that acknowledges what is hard without concluding that hard is permanent. There is a man who spent years describing himself in his own mind as someone who had missed his chance, who had let the important years go by without making something of them. One evening, talking to a friend he trusted, he said this out loud for the first time. And the friend was quiet for a moment, and then said, "I do not see someone who missed their chance. I see someone who has been doing the slower, harder thing, which is building a life rather than a career." The man did not immediately agree, but the language had shifted. And in the weeks that followed, something in his interior began to arrange itself differently around the new words. Not because the words were magic, because they were more true, and truth, spoken with genuine attention, is the closest thing to sacred speech available in ordinary life. Chapter 25, The 7 Principles Revisited. Now let us gather. We have moved through many territories tonight, through history and mythology and psychology, through the ladder of the spheres and the fire of purification and the quiet practice of unforgetting. Let us hold them together for a moment. The Hermetic tradition, as it was understood and transmitted over the centuries, organized its insights into a set of principles, not laws, not commandments, observations. Observations about the nature of reality and the nature of the human being within it. We have touched most of them already tonight, in different forms, but let us name them now and let them settle. The first, mind, is the foundation. Everything that exists has its source in a living intelligence. The cosmos is not empty matter organized by accident. It is the expression of a mind that, in its deepest form, you share. The second, as above, so below. The patterns that organize the large world organize the small one. And attending to your inner life is attending to something real. The third, everything vibrates. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is permanently stuck. The most rigid thing you know is, at some level of observation, in motion. And what appears to be static suffering is, if you look closely enough, already moving. The fourth, everything has poles. What appears to be opposite is actually different degrees of the same thing. Hot and cold, love and fear, clarity and confusion. And transformation is always possible because you never need to leap across a chasm. You only need to shift along a spectrum. The fifth, everything moves in rhythm. Expansion follows contraction. Light follows dark. Energy rises and falls. And the wisdom is not in maintaining the peak. It is in trusting the rhythm enough to rest in the valley. Let your breath slow. Let your body settle. The sixth, every effect has a cause. Your present is the product of many causes, but your present is also a cause. The quality of your attention right now is already shaping what comes next. The seventh, everything contains 2 great principles in relationship: the outward, creative, initiating movement, and the inward, receptive, nurturing one. Most of us are trained to value only the outward one. The Hermetic tradition says, wholeness requires both the capacity to act and the capacity to receive, the capacity to think and the capacity to feel, the capacity to do and the capacity to be. Tonight, the receptive principle is invited. You have done enough acting today, enough thinking, enough solving. For these hours, the invitation is simply to receive. Whatever the night offers, whatever the quiet carries, let it come. These 7 principles are not a checklist. They are not a system to memorize and apply. They are lenses. And the value of a lens is not in the lens itself. It is in what you see when you hold it up. When you look at your life through the principle of correspondence, you begin to notice the patterns that repeat. The same dynamic in different rooms, different years, different faces. The interior state that keeps recreating the same exterior. When you look through the principle of rhythm, you begin to notice the contractions are not permanent. The expansions are not guaranteed forever either, but the pulse continues. When you look through the principle of cause and effect, you begin to notice the small, consistent choices accumulate. The gentle, repeated turning toward a different quality of attention is not wasted. It is building something. And when you look through all 7 at once, which is what the Hermetic tradition asks, eventually what you see is this: a cosmos that is not random, not indifferent. 8, 8, 8, 8. Not broken. A cosmos built on principles as reliable as mathematics and as intimate as breath. And a human being, your particular human being, with your particular history and your particular aches and your particular private joys, as a living expression of all 7 at once, always. Whether you know it or not, tonight you know it. Let that be enough. Chapter 26. The Emerald Tablet. There is a document that has fascinated thinkers for over 1,000 years, short enough to fit on a tablet, dense enough to generate libraries of commentary. The Emerald Tablet. Its origins are mysterious. Some versions say it was found in a tomb. Some say it was the compressed essence of everything the Hermetic tradition ever tried to say. None of this can be verified, but the text itself is real, and it has been translated into Arabic, Latin, and dozens of European languages. Each translation generating new commentary, new insight, new application. Its central statement is the one we have been circling all night. As above, so below. As within, so without. But the tablet says more than this. It speaks of the sun and moon as parents, of the wind carrying the seed, of the earth as nurse. It speaks of a single thing, the first matter, the original substance that underlies all the diverse forms of the world. And it says, separate the subtle from the gross. gently, with great care. This is the alchemical instruction. Separate what is essential from what is accidental, what is real from what is constructed, what is yours from what was laid on you by others, gently, with great care, not violently, not urgently, the way a skilled artisan separates gold from ore, with patience, with attention. Knowing that the gold is there, even when it is not yet visible, let your body be heavy. Let the breath move on its own. The emerald tablet ends with a statement of authority. This is what I am called Hermes Trismegistus, having the 3 parts of the philosophy of the whole world. 3 parts: the philosopher, the priest, the king, the one who knows, the one who practices, the one who governs, not others, but the self. These 3 parts, the tradition says, must be unified in a single person for the transformation to be complete. Knowing without practicing is half asleep. Practicing without knowing is blind. Governing without both is arbitrary. The integrated person, the one who has done the patient work of separating the subtle from the gross within themselves, does not need to announce their transformation. It is visible in the quality of their presence, in the calm they carry into difficult rooms, in the way they listen, the way they respond rather than react, in the particular quality of attention that makes the people around them feel, somehow, more themselves. This is the gold the emerald tablet is pointing toward, not a substance, a quality of being, available to any person willing to do the patient, gentle, consistent work of attending to their own interior. Starting perhaps with a quiet night like this one. Let your breath settle deeply now. The emerald tablet was not written for scholars. Isaac Newton, who translated it in private, was one of the most intellectually powerful human beings who ever lived. And he did not approach the text as a curiosity. He approached it as a serious inquiry into the nature of things. He was wrong about some of what he found there, and right about some of it too. And the distinction matters less than this. The man who laid the foundations of modern physics believed that hidden within the language of the ancient world was something worth taking seriously. Not as superstition, as a different kind of knowing, a knowing that moved through image and symbol and correspondence rather than through equation and proof. Both kinds of knowing point toward the same reality. One measures it, the other inhabits it. And in the quiet of a late night, the measuring kind grows less useful. What remains is the inhabiting kind, the felt sense of being inside a cosmos that has structure. That has depth. That responds to attention with revelation. You do not need to understand the emerald tablet. You only need to sit inside the question it asks. What is above and what is below? And what would it mean if they were, in some essential way, the same? Let that question be with you as the night deepens, not as a puzzle to solve, as a space to rest inside. Chapter 27. The Secret of Transformation. Now we arrive at the question that everything else has. been building toward? How does a person actually change? Not in theory, not as a philosophical principle, in practice, in the concrete experience of a human life. The Hermetic tradition had a very specific answer, and it is not the answer most people expect. The answer is not will, not discipline, not rigorous self-improvement or relentless effort. The answer is attention, sustained, gentle, honest attention to what is actually happening in the interior, without judgment, without agenda, without the constant effort to make yourself different from what you are. Because the Hermetic tradition understood something that modern psychology is only recently confirming. The things we push away do not transform. They go underground and gain power. But the things we genuinely see, the things we allow into full awareness with curiosity rather than shame, begin to change simply by being seen. Carl Jung called this the transcendent function, the capacity of the psyche, when its contents are brought into full awareness, to generate new possibilities that the rational mind alone could never predict. And it is what the Hermetic alchemists called the philosopher's stone. Not a physical substance that turns lead to gold, but a quality of attentiveness that transforms the base material of ordinary experience into something luminous. Let your awareness soften. Let it become receptive rather than directive. There is a particular quality of attention that is available in moments of genuine stillness. It is different from the attention of the working day. The working day asks attention to be focused, directed, evaluative, always moving toward a judgment or a decision or an outcome. But there is another kind of attention, the kind that is present without directing, aware without evaluating, open in all directions like a clear sky. This attention does not force change, but in its presence, things shift. The contraction in the chest softens. The fear that was presenting itself as certainty relaxes into uncertainty. The certainty that was presenting itself as protection relaxes into openness. Not because you did anything, because the attention itself, like sunlight on ice, simply performs its nature, and its nature is warmth, and warmth dissolves. The secret of transformation in the Hermetic understanding is not a technique, it is a relationship between the one who attends and the one who is attended to. And when both are the same person, when you are genuinely with yourself, in honest and unhurried awareness, the transformation that no effort could produce begins to happen on its own. Carl Jung spent decades observing this in his patients. He called it the transcendent function, the capacity of the psyche, when attended to honestly, to move of its own accord toward greater wholeness. He did not cause it. He made space for it. He asked his patients not to force resolution, but to sit with the tension between what they were and what they longed to be, to hold both without collapsing either. And in that holding, something moved, not always quickly, not always comfortably, but in a direction that felt, afterward, like the right one. You have experienced this too. The stuck thing that came unstuck, not when you pushed harder, but when you stepped back. The decision that made itself when you stopped trying to make it. The relationship that improved not through intervention, but through a change in how you were being inside it. These are the philosopher's stone, working, not in a laboratory, in an ordinary life, in ordinary moments, in a body that is growing heavier now, in a room that is growing quieter, in a night that is asking nothing of you except this: be here. Let yourself be attended to. The attention that transforms is not always your own. Sometimes it is the night's. Let the night do its work. Chapter 28. Death as Cosmic Return. Let us sit with something that most people prefer to approach sideways: death. Not as a topic to be anxious about, not as a problem to be solved, as a teaching. The Hermetic tradition had a great deal to say about death, not because it was morbid, but because it took death seriously as a dimension of the total picture of what it means to be alive. The Corpus Hermeticum contains dialogues in which the nature of death is examined from the Hermetic perspective. Death, Hermes says, is not what it appears to be. The body dissolves. This is true. The particular form, this face, this history, this name will cease. But the nous, the divine mind that was never born and cannot be destroyed, does not dissolve. It returns to the source from which it came. The way a river, after a long journey through varied landscapes, returns at last to the sea, not unchanged. The journey has added something. The experiences of a particular life have been gathered and carried. But the form dissolves, and what is essential returns. Now, this is not a promise about the mechanics of what happens after death. The Hermetic tradition does not offer a precise geography of the afterlife. It offers something more useful, a quality of relationship to the fact of death. The psychiatrist Irvin Yalom spent his career studying what he called death anxiety, the way that awareness of mortality shapes everything we do, often without our realizing it. He found that much psychological suffering has death anxiety somewhere in its roots. The obsessive busyness that never lets a person rest, the compulsive need for achievement, the difficulty letting go, the inability to be present. All of them, traced carefully, often lead back to the same source. A frightened relationship to the fact that this particular form, this particular life, is temporary. Let your breath slow. Let the body be heavy. The Hermetic response to death anxiety is not denial. It is expansion. If you are not only this particular form, if the deepest part of you is nous, divine mind, and that mind is continuous with the source of all things, then the death of the form is not the death of what is essential. And holding that awareness even briefly, even imperfectly, changes something about how the ordinary day is lived. The Stoics called this practice memento mori. Remember that you will die, not to generate fear, to generate presence. Because when you remember that the form is temporary, the present moment becomes more vivid. The ordinary things, a meal, a conversation, the weight of a body at rest, become, briefly, more than ordinary. They become gifts, received more fully because you have remembered they will not always be here. Irvin Yalom, the existential psychiatrist who spent his career helping people face mortality, observed something that surprised him early in his work. When patients were helped to confront death honestly, not to be reassured about it, not to be given comforting fictions, but to actually sit with the reality of it, something unexpected happened. Their lives became richer, not darker, richer. The things they had been postponing, they began. The words they had been saving, they said. The people they had been taking for granted, they saw more clearly. Yalom was not a Hermeticist, but the Hermetic tradition would have recognized precisely what he was describing. The practice of death awareness is not morbid, it is clarifying. And in this particular hour, lying still, with the day's demands finally quiet, there is a version of this available. Not a dramatic confrontation with mortality, something quieter, a simple recognition that this night, this breath, this particular quality of awareness in this particular body is not permanent and is, for that reason, remarkable. Not something to grip, something to receive. The weight of your body, the sound of the breath, the dark behind your eyes. These are the ordinary miracles that mortality makes visible to those patient enough to notice. You are one of those people tonight, and tonight is enough. Chapter 29. Loneliness in a living cosmos. There is a particular kind of loneliness that is not about being alone. You can feel it in a crowded room, at a party where everyone seems comfortable, in a family gathering where the roles are so well established that there is no room for anything unexpected to be said. A loneliness that is not the absence of people, the absence of genuine contact, the feeling of moving through the world in a shell, of being seen but not known, of performing the expected version of yourself so consistently that even you sometimes lose track of what lies beneath the performance. This loneliness is, the Hermetic tradition would say, a symptom of disconnection, not from other people primarily, from the living all, from the recognition that the cosmos is not an indifferent container but a living system, and that your particular life is part of it. When this recognition is absent, when the world feels like a collection of separate objects and events, happening without any deeper pattern or purpose, loneliness takes a specific shape, the shape of a small self, adrift in a large and indifferent universe. Nothing connects to anything else. Meaning is something you must manufacture alone. The weight of that is enormous. And the Hermetic answer is not a social prescription. Not go make more connections. It is a deeper shift, a change in the understanding of what you are and what the world is. If you are not a small self adrift in an empty cosmos, but a particular expression of a living intelligence that runs through everything, then the loneliness, while real at the level of form, is not the deepest truth. At the deepest level, you are not alone. You are always already embedded in something that knows you, because you are part of what it is. Let your body settle. Notice the breath. This is not easy to feel. It cannot be thought your way to. But there are moments, usually moments of stillness or natural beauty or genuine connection with another person, when the separateness softens and something wider is briefly felt. The Hermetic tradition says those moments are not escapes from reality. They are glimpses of the deeper reality that the ordinary world is resting on. And the work is not to make every moment feel like those moments. The work is to remember, during the ordinary ones, that the deeper reality is still there, still holding, still including you in its living pattern, even when you cannot feel it, even on the hardest nights. Especially then, think of a moment when you felt it, that wordless sense of being part of something larger. Maybe it was in nature, a landscape that was too wide for the ordinary mind to hold. An ocean, a mountain, a sky that went on past any edge you could see. Maybe it was in a crowd, unexpectedly. A concert or a ceremony where for a few minutes the boundaries of self became thin and something moved through many people at once. Maybe it was simpler than either of those. A meal with someone who knew you well. A conversation that went deeper than intended. A moment of recognizing yourself in another person's difficulty and feeling the strangeness and relief of not being alone in it. These moments were not accidents. They were not hallucinations. They were not moments when reality briefly suspended its rules. They were moments when the living all became briefly visible through the particular, when the cosmos, for a moment, looked through your eyes and recognized itself. The Hermetic tradition says this recognition is the beginning of the cure for loneliness, not a cure that requires perfect people or permanent circumstances, a cure that lives inside the quality of attention you bring to ordinary experience. The more genuinely you attend to the person in front of you, to the room around you, to the body breathing beneath you right now, the more the living all makes itself felt. It is here. It has always been here. And tonight, in this stillness, it is as close as it can get. Chapter 30, Healing the Split Within. There is a split that most people carry, and that the modern world has done little to help close. The split between what is visible and what is real. What you present to the world and what actually moves through you in the quiet. The competence and the uncertainty. The warmth and the exhaustion. The patience and the private moments of being done, the confidence and the private doubt. Most people have become so practiced at managing the outer version that the inner one has been waiting quietly for longer than they realize. The Hermetic tradition called this the problem of the mask. Not using that exact word, Carl Jung was the one who gave it the name persona. But the concept is there in the Hermetic texts. The person who has identified entirely with the face they wear for the world has, in Hermetic terms, fallen into the sleep of matter. They have forgotten that the mask is not the face, and the healing, the restoration of wholeness, begins with the recognition that both are real. The face you present and the face beneath it, and that neither one is the whole truth of what you are. The psychologist Carl Rogers, who spent his career working with people in distress, made an observation that sounds simple but carries great weight. He said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." This is the Hermetic insight in psychological language. The healing does not begin with correction. It begins with honest seeing. When you stop fighting the parts of yourself you have hidden, when you allow them into awareness without immediately trying to fix or suppress them, something loosens. The split begins to close. Let your breath slow. Let your hands open. Tonight, in the dark, there is no performance required. No version of yourself to maintain. Just the particular human being that you are, with all the contradictions, all the things that have not been resolved, all the feelings that did not fit into the day. They are not problems. They are the contents of a real life. A life that has weight and texture and history. And the Hermetic invitation is simply this: let them be here, not to analyze them, not to judge them, just to let them be present in the safety of a night that asks nothing of you, and notice that when they are allowed to be present, they do not overwhelm, they simply settle, like the sand settling in the water, leaving something clearer. Carl Rogers, the psychologist who spent his career creating the conditions for healing, observed something that sounds almost paradoxical when you first hear it. He said, "The curious thing is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Not when I force change. Not when I am hard on myself about what needs to be different. Not when I maintain a constant internal pressure to be other than I am, when I accept." And the Hermetic tradition, coming from a completely different era, a completely different vocabulary, says something with the same shape. The healing does not begin with correction. It begins with recognition, with seeing what is actually here without the overlay of judgment that makes genuine seeing impossible, because you cannot work with what you cannot see, and you cannot see clearly what you are constantly evaluating. The split within, between what you present and what is real, between what you allow others to see and what you know yourself to be, does not heal through greater discipline. It heals through the slow, patient, gentle practice of letting the real thing be present. Not all at once, not dramatically, a little more each night, a little less performance, a little more honest witness, until the distance between the presented self and the actual self narrows. Not to zero, not to some impossible transparency, but enough. Enough that you can move through the world as someone more fully yourself, and enough tonight that you can lie here without a mask, without anything to maintain, just you and the dark and the steady, quiet presence of whatever holds it all. Chapter 31. The Inner Critic of Matter. Let us name something directly. The voice that says you are not enough, that you have not done enough, been enough, achieved enough, understood enough, changed enough. You know this voice. It arrives most reliably at night, when the defenses of the day have softened, when the accomplishments and the social validation are no longer present to argue against it, and it reviews, it itemizes, it compares. The Hermetic tradition had a specific analysis of where this voice comes from, and it was not the analysis you might expect. The inner critic, in Hermetic terms, is not evidence of a damaged soul. It is evidence of a soul that has become too deeply identified with the material world, the world of measurement and comparison, of better and worse, of success and failure, of the ladder that never ends because there is always another rung. These are the categories of matter, of the lower world, of time and achievement and accumulation. And the soul that has forgotten its original nature, that has fallen asleep in matter, has no other standard to apply to itself. It can only measure itself by the standards of the world it believes is real, and those standards are, by design, impossible to satisfy, because they are oriented toward acquisition, and acquisition is infinite. There is always more to achieve, more to accumulate, more to understand, more to become. The Hermetic remedy is not to stop caring about growth. It is to restore the other standard, the standard that has nothing to do with measurement, the standard of the nous. By this standard, you are not evaluated. You are recognized, not as someone who has achieved enough, as something that, in its deepest nature, is already whole. Let your body settle. Let your jaw release. The inner critic is doing its job. It was taught to do this job by a world that values measurable output. But it is not the most accurate voice in you. The most accurate voice does not measure. It witnesses. And what it witnesses is not a person who has fallen short. It witnesses a particular concentration of awareness, moving through a life, doing the best it can with what it has, and finding in that witnessing nothing that needs to be condemned, only something that needs to be seen clearly and with care. There is a woman who spent most of her adult life applying to herself a standard she would never have applied to. anyone else. She was generous with others, patient with their mistakes, genuinely kind when they struggled. But toward herself, there was a running audit, a constant accounting of what had not been done, what had been said wrong, what should have been better. She had not chosen this. It had been formed in her over years by the accumulated message that her value depended on her performance. One evening, her daughter said to her, "Mum, you would never talk to me the way you talk to yourself. Why do you let yourself do that?" She did not have an answer, but the question stayed. And slowly, over the months that followed, she began to apply to herself the same standard she applied to people she loved. Not perfect, not without the inner critic still arising, but with the growing capacity to hear it and then hear something else, a quieter voice, the one that does not evaluate, the one that simply says, "Here you are, tired, trying, worthy of the same kindness you give without hesitation." The Hermetic tradition calls the divine mind the witness, and the witness does not judge, it sees, it knows, it holds. Tonight, let yourself be held by that quality of witnessing, not the critic, the witness. It is here. It has always been here. Chapter 32, Therapy of the Soul. Let us pause here, not to meditate, not to fix anything, just to notice. Right now your body is lying still. Your breath is moving on its own. The room is holding you in the dark. And for these next few minutes, there is nothing you need to do except be present to what is here. The Hermetic tradition had a phrase for this kind of attention: therapia of the soul. Therapy, in its original Greek meaning, did not mean treatment of pathology. It meant care, service, tending, the way a gardener tends a garden, not controlling it, not forcing it to grow in a particular direction, but removing the obstacles, providing the conditions, and then trusting the garden's own intelligence to do the rest. Therapia of the soul is that kind of tending. Let your awareness move gently through your body, not looking for problems, just noticing. Notice wherever your body feels heavy, let it be heavy. Notice wherever there is tension. You do not need to release it, just notice it. Notice wherever there is warmth. Let yourself feel the warmth. Notice wherever there is discomfort. Let it be there without arguing with it. This is not passive. It is a particular kind of active presence, the willingness to be with what is, without immediately trying to change it. Now, bring to mind something you have been carrying, not the largest thing, something medium-sized, a worry perhaps, a feeling of incompleteness, something you have not been able to resolve. Don't try to solve it. Just hold it in awareness, the way you would hold a river stone in an open hand. Feel its weight. Notice its texture, the particular shape of this thing you have been carrying. Now, notice something else. The hand that holds it is not troubled by its weight. The awareness in which this thing is present is not diminished by its presence. The Hermetic tradition says that the divine mind, the nous, can hold everything that arises in human experience without being burdened by it, not because it is numb, but because it is larger than what it holds, and you have access to this quality of awareness, not as a distant cosmic thing, right here, right now. Let the thing you have been carrying rest in open awareness. You do not need to solve it tonight. You do not need to resolve it, explain it, or release it on command. Just let it be present in awareness that does not need it to be different. And notice what shifts, even slightly, even just for a breath. That shift, barely perceptible, is the therapy of the soul. It asks nothing more of you than this. And notice that you are still here, still breathing, still held. The awareness that holds everything you carry is not tired. It has been patient for longer than you know, and tonight it simply says, rest. Chapter 33, Inner Peace and the One. Let us speak about peace. Not the peace that arrives when everything is resolved. Not the peace that comes when circumstances align in your favor. Not the peace of having finally solved the problem that has been following you. The Hermetic tradition was not interested in that kind of peace, because that kind of peace is always temporary. The condition changes. The problem returns or is replaced by a different one. The circumstances shift, and the peace goes with them. The Hermetic tradition was interested in something different. Peace as a quality of awareness. A peace that does not depend on circumstances being any particular way. That is present in difficulty and in ease. That can be found in the quiet and in the noise. That does not require the world to behave differently before it can exist. In the Hermetic tradition, this peace has a name. It is called the peace of the One, not peace with each other. Not peace of mind in the ordinary sense. The peace that belongs to the ground of being itself, the undisturbed quality at the center of existence, which is, paradoxically, also the center of you. Plotinus, the Neoplatonist philosopher who studied in Alexandria and whose thought was saturated with Hermetic influence, spent his life trying to describe what he called the One, not a person, not a deity with attributes, the simple, sourceless source of everything. And what he noticed over decades of practice was that the human being can, in certain moments of genuine stillness, come into contact with this, not by traveling to it, by becoming quiet enough to notice it was always here. It does not announce itself. It has no drama. It does not compete with the noise. It simply waits, patient beyond any human patience, present beyond any human presence. And when the noise drops below a certain threshold, it is felt. Not as an emotion, not as a thought, as a quality of the background. Like discovering that the room you have been standing in has always been resting on solid ground, and you simply had not noticed before now. The peace of the one is not something you produce. It is something you uncover by being still enough for long enough that what was always here has the space to be recognized. Tonight, you are still, and the ground is here. Plotinus described the experience of the one using an image that has stayed with readers for 17 centuries. He said, "It is like a man who has gone into a temple. At first, he sees the statues, the carvings, the altar, the elaborate details of the decoration. He walks through all of it. He examines it. He finds it beautiful. And then he enters the innermost chamber. And there is nothing elaborate, nothing decorated, nothing that makes demands on his attention, just the presence of what the whole temple was built to contain. And in that chamber, something in him grows quiet. Not because anything was removed, because he finally stopped adding. The temple, Plotinus said, is not the point. The innermost chamber is the point. And everything else, all the philosophy, all the practice, all the years of accumulated living and wondering and searching, was the walk through the outer rooms necessary, worth taking, but only worth taking because of where it leads. You have been walking through the outer rooms tonight, and now, in this hour, this breath, this particular stillness, you are close to the innermost chamber. It does not require any more steps, only the willingness to stop moving, to let the elaborate outer world go quiet, and to rest in what was always at the center. The undisturbed, the sourceless source. The ground you have been standing on through every season of your life, without knowing it was there. It is here now. And it has always been waiting, with a patience that makes every human patience seem brief. Chapter 34. The Quiet Work of Ascent. We have moved a long way tonight, through the history of a tradition, through its principles and its practices, through the stories of seekers and teachers and ordinary people who, in their own way, were doing what you are doing right now, looking for something, not in the way of urgent seeking, in the way of quiet opening. Let us gather what has been found and let it settle into something you can carry. The Hermetic tradition did not want students who could recite doctrine. It wanted people who had actually changed something in the quality of how they lived, not dramatically, not in ways that would make a good story, in the small, daily, barely visible ways that, accumulated over months and years, amount to a different kind of life. A life with slightly more space between stimulus and response. with slightly more access to the still point beneath the noise, with slightly more capacity to be genuinely present in the moments that matter most. These changes do not come from a single long conversation, not even one that lasted 3 hours. They come from the slow, patient practice of returning again and again to the quality of attention that tonight's conversation has been pointing toward. That is the actual work, the Hermetic ascent, the journey from the sleep of matter toward the remembering of the divine mind is not a single dramatic event. It is the accumulated work of many quiet moments. And here is a path you might walk over the coming days that carries the spirit of what we have been sitting with tonight, day 1, tomorrow. Simply notice one moment when the lower mind is running, not to stop it, just to notice it, to see it from a slight distance, to observe the river rather than being the river. That observation, gentle, patient, without judgment, is the beginning of ascent. Day 2. Find one moment of genuine stillness, not a long period, 2 minutes, perhaps, before sleep or before you reach for the phone in the morning. Just 2 minutes in which you allow the mind to settle on its own, not forcing, not directing, just waiting, and see what is there when the directing stops. Day 3. Look for one correspondence, one place where your inner life and the outer world are echoing each other, where a pattern in your relationships reflects a pattern in your inner world, or where the quality of your attention is shaping what you perceive. Notice the as above, so below, not in cosmic terms, in ordinary terms. Day 4. Practice the gentlest form of release. Choose one thought you have been gripping, one story about yourself or someone else that you have been rehearsing, and, for one moment, imagine setting it on a shelf across the room, not throwing it away, not resolving it, just for one moment not holding it. And notice what it feels like when your hand is open. Day 5. Find one thing that is gold, one quality in yourself that the inner critic overlooks, not to inflate it or perform it, just to acknowledge it quietly, the way you would acknowledge a friend's genuine gift, something that is simply real and yours, and worth noticing. Day 6. Let the rhythm carry you. Notice, just once today, where you are in a natural cycle, rising or falling, expanding or contracting, and instead of resisting the direction of the current, allow it, rest in the contraction if you are there, move in the expansion if it is present, and trust that the rhythm knows where it is going. Day 7. Simply be. No practice, no observation, no technique, just one moment, one real, unhurried moment in which you are simply here, not performing, not improving, just alive. And let that be enough, because it is. Chapter 35. A Candle in the Darkness. There is a very old symbol in the Hermetic tradition. A single candle, not a great light, not a blaze, not the sun, just one small, steady flame burning in the darkness. Not to eliminate the darkness. The darkness is vast, and the flame is small. But the flame is real, and a real flame changes the darkness around it, not by conquering it, by simply being present within it. You are that candle, not a metaphor, a statement of what the Hermetic tradition understood about a human being who has done any measure of the inner work, who has looked at their own lower mind with some honesty, who has sat, even briefly, with the quality of attention that lies beneath the thinking, who has allowed the night, even for a few hours, to soften them. That person carries something, not dramatically, not visibly, but the quality of their presence changes what is around them. The way a steady candle changes a room, not because it is powerful, because it is real. Giordano Bruno, the Renaissance philosopher who was executed in Rome in 1600 for ideas that his century could not contain, spent his life proclaiming a vision of an infinite universe filled with living light. He was burned for it, but the ideas could not be burned. They continued. They moved through the intellectual underground of the 17th century. They shaped Spinoza and Leibniz and eventually found their way into the language of modern cosmology. One person, one steady flame of genuine understanding, burning, sometimes at great cost, and continuing to illuminate. Not because of strength, because of the nature of light. Light does not try to spread. It simply is what it is, and being what it is, it spreads. Let your breath come gently. Let your eyes stay soft. The inner work you have been doing tonight, the listening, the allowing, the willingness to sit with old ideas and feel what is real in them. This is not small. It is not nothing. It is the quiet accumulation of clarity. And the Hermetic tradition, in its most generous moments, says that this kind of clarity does not stay contained. It enters the atmosphere of your life, into the way you are with the people close to you, into the quality of presence you bring to difficult conversations, into the patience that arrives, sometimes where impatience would have been easier. You may not see it. The people around you may not name it, but it is there. The candle burning in a room that is darker than it was before and lighter than it would have been. And here is what the candle does not need. It does not need to be noticed. It does not need to be the largest flame. It does not need to have reached some final destination or resolved every question. It simply needs to be burning. And that, tonight, you are. Bruno died without knowing whether his ideas would survive. He stood in the Campo de Fiori on a February morning, and the crowd was there, and the smoke was there. And he had no evidence that anything he had thought or said or written would outlast him. He had only the quality of his conviction, that the universe was larger than the church allowed. That light was everywhere. That no fire on earth could extinguish the light in the mind. He could not know he was right. He chose to act as if he was. That kind of faith, not religious faith, not the faith that requires a guarantee, but the faith that says, what I see as real, I will live as real. Regardless of what the surrounding darkness makes of it, this is a Hermetic virtue, and it is not reserved for philosophers who write books that shape centuries. It belongs to anyone who, in their own quiet way, decides to live from the deeper thing rather than from the noise. The person who chooses patience in a moment that calls for reaction. The person who chooses honesty in a moment where performance would be easier. The person who stays with a difficult feeling long enough to learn what it is asking for, rather than running to the nearest distraction. Each of these is a small flame. Each of these is the Hermetic teaching lived in an ordinary moment. You have these moments more than you know. And tonight, having sat with this tradition for this long, you carry a little more of that quality with you, not because you absorbed a doctrine, because you allowed yourself for a few hours to attend to something real. That attention was the practice. That practice is the flame. And it does not go out when the conversation ends. It continues in the particular dark of your particular room, in the particular body that is growing quieter now, in the particular awareness that has been here all along, watching without urgency, burning without effort, simply being what it is. Chapter 36, Resting in the Living All. We have arrived at the end of tonight's long conversation, and we have arrived not accidentally at the place where we began, the dark, the stillness, the mind that has been running and is now, perhaps, a little more quiet than it was. The body that is lying in the particular room that holds it tonight. You began this evening with a question that was not quite formed, the feeling that something deeper was available, that beneath the layer of the day's demands and the night's worries, something was present that did not have a name, you had been taught. The Hermetic tradition has given us many names for it tonight. The nous, the living all, the one, the divine mind. End, the light before the light. None of the names quite capture it, because what the names are pointing toward is not a concept, it is an experience. And the experience is this: you are not separate from the source of things. You are made of the same substance as the light that the ancient seeker saw when the vision arrived and the cosmos opened. Not metaphorically, in the Hermetic. Understanding, quite literally, The divine mind is not something you are trying to reach. It is what you are, beneath the habits and the history and the forgetting. And the nights when you are still enough to sense it, not dramatically, not with lightning, just with a quiet recognition that something is here that was always here. Those nights are the closest that the ordinary human experience comes to the knowing. The Hermetic tradition spent 2,000 years trying to describe. Let your body settle. Let the breath be completely natural. Somewhere in ancient Alexandria, a person lay awake at night and felt the gap between what they knew and what they were longing to know. And they turned toward the wisdom available to them. They sat with it. They let it do what it could, and they fell asleep. Not enlightened, not transformed in any dramatic way, but perhaps a little more at peace with the vast mystery they were living inside. As you are tonight, the cosmos is not indifferent to you. In the Hermetic understanding, the cosmos is partly made of you. Every genuine moment of love or grief or wonder, every night you have lain awake trying to understand, every moment you chose, however briefly, to turn inward rather than away. All of it is part of the living all becoming aware of itself through you. And that is not nothing. That is, in fact, one of the most remarkable things the universe has ever managed to do, to find a way through a particular arrangement of matter and memory and longing to wonder at itself. You are that wondering. And tonight, having wondered long enough, you can rest in what the wondering has pointed toward. Not an answer, something better than an answer, a quality of being, present, aware, continuous with the source. The stars are not separate from you. The night is not empty around you. The vast, breathing, living cosmos is not indifferent to your particular point of awareness. You are in it. It is in you. And that, the Hermetic tradition says, and the long silence of the night confirms, is enough, more than enough. Let the breath come easily now. Let the body be heavy and held. Let whatever thoughts are still moving, move without your attention. You have done enough for tonight. The rest is simply being. And being is something you have never stopped doing. Not for a single moment, not even in sleep. Sleep now.